May 1st. Happy May Day. I'm going to call the meeting to order. We have 5, so that gives us our quorum. At noon, Brian plans to be here. Have you heard anything from Vanessa at all? Okay, or DJ? So they'll probably pop in a few minutes late. Anyway, we're going to open up today's meeting with an interview for Historical Building and Site Commission candidates. We have one position, citizen at large, that there are 3 different people here. So I will go ahead, and you want to get started? Send somebody in, or? I can wing it.
Okay, she's bringing him down, so I'll call Linda Cole. Hold on.
All righty. Proclamation is in there. We'll see.
Hello.
Hello, is this Linda?
Yes, it is.
Well, hello, this is Valerie Lovelace. I'm acting mayor today. Sarah is not here. So I'm going to start you off, and I thank you for calling in again. First of all, I want you to just tell us what it is that makes you want to be a part of the Historical Sites and Building Commission.
I would really like to be part of an organization that helps with preserving the downtown area, bringing about its, or preserving its history, and making more people aware of it, and with that, just kind of keeping it in the foreground of stuff, and not just that, like some communities where it just kind of goes into the background. I do. I like how Grants Pass has really grabbed a hold of that and made it a big deal, and I like that.
Okay, so can you give us the experience that you have that makes you add value to the committee or commission?
Experience?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what I would have for experience other than I love preserving old things. I have redone my historic house here in town, and just really enjoy that.
Okay, can you give me some experience that you might have had working with a group of people on a group and collaborating?
No, I have not done that.
Okay, I'm going to open it up and see if any of the other council people have any questions they'd like to ask right now. Yes, okay. Rob?
Yeah, hi, Linda. Thank you for applying. I am sorry, I didn't hear the very beginning of what you're saying, but I think you're applying for the slot. It says owns a property in either the historic or conservation district or owns a historic landmark. And I'm just wondering what property you own.
I own the Dimmick Judson house.
I'm sorry, which house?
The Dimmick Judson house, the one that Thomas Croxton built in 1865.
Okay, and where is that?
It's right by the high school. It's on
Okay.
It's at 906 Northeast
Right.
8th Street.
Thank you. Yeah, I know which one it is now. Thank you. How long have you owned it?
Next month it'll be 6 years.
Nice. Thank you.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Any other questions? Rick?
Linda, I see in your application, this is Rick Riker, that you indicate you have experience in architecture and planning, which could be useful in the committee. Can you describe some of your previous history in that or experiences?
Well, my first job here in Grants Pass is working on the county planning department, And then I went to architectural school, and I worked on residential and commercial buildings, designing and drawing up plans.
Thank you.
Okay, that looks like it's all our questions. If you just want to go one more time and tell us why you think you're the right person for this project.
Right now I'm driving through town, and I love our old buildings in town. I wish there were still more of them still standing, and but I love that Grants Pass has preserved what they have and have really stepped up to make preservation of them a priority. And I would like to be part of that moving forward.
Okay, thank you very much. So we will be giving the job to someone on Wednesday evening's meeting, and at that time we'll let you know who gets chosen. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for calling me.
Okay, next will be Cynthia. Am I correct, Karen? Okay.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello, Cynthia.
Yes.
This is Valerie Lovelace. I am acting as the mayor today, as the mayor is gone. So I will be asking several questions and then turning it over to other counselors to ask questions as well. So thank you for being here. What I'd like to do is describe why it is that you want to be a part of the Historic Buildings and Sites Commission.
I'm an art historian, and I majored in art history and minored kind of in the history of cities and buildings.
Okay. So
And I dated a lot of architects when I was in college because the art department sort of shared a building with the architecture department, School of Architecture.
Okay, so what specific skills would you bring to the HBSC?
I've lived in Grants Pass since '76, and I've seen neighborhoods grow and change and decline. And I live on Washington Boulevard, which is going to be has always been part of a historic district. And I live in a 1910 house, which I'm trying to modernize and also to keep some of the grace and beauty of its history.
Okay, so you're obviously familiar with the historic district and the plans for the future.
Well, that's basically why I joined the committee, and yes, it's one of my main interests.
Okay, can you give an example of a time when you've collaborated on a commission in the past where you've been able to listen and take the input from others?
Well, I've been on the tree committee for many, many years, and I used to do the paperwork to make us the Tree City USA before a staff member took over. I did it for quite a few years. And I listened to what the committee's ideas were, what different people wanted and their ideas, and sort of put them together and went with that.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to open up and see if there's other counselors who have questions. Anybody else? Rob?
Yeah, hi, Cynthia.
Hi, Rob.
Can you think of any, we'll say, unfinished business or goals that from your last term that you'd like to see accomplished in the next term?
I'm kind of new to the committee and sort of came into it, and I'm just really in the learning phase. There's so much to learn on this committee, and there's so much legal things that this committee is bound by. And so it has a fairly high learning curve, and I'm just kind of learning and doing little things. I don't have any huge goals at this point.
Okay, thank you, Cynthia. Any other questions from the council? Yes, Joel?
Hi, Cynthia. This is Joel.
Hi, Joel.
Hey, good to hear your voice. Say, I just wanted to make sure, do you have enough time to attend the meetings?
Yes, I do. I've been sick lately. I had food poisoning, and it turns out my next door neighbor had it too, so we're kind of concerned. And then she got it, then I got it again. And so I've kind of been not physically getting out too much, but I've been attending all the meetings by phone and keeping up with, the everything they send me.
Well, get better.
Yes, I'm trying my best. I'm actually better now, but I'm still kind of weak from not being able to eat for a while.
Okay. Thank you, Cynthia.
Okay, it looks like there's no further questions, Cynthia. So Wednesday night, we will be making the decision, and after that meeting, someone will call and let you know, or you're welcome to watch the meeting Wednesday night at 6. Thank you,
Yeah,
Cynthia.
I get the minutes, and then I follow the call in. I don't think you're televised anymore.
I think we are. Yep, I think you can see us on YouTube, City Council, or I think there's a TV station, I think it was 186 or something. So yes, you should be able to. Anyway, either way, we'll let you know, and thank you very much. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much.
You bet.
Bye.
Bye. Next is Sam. Okay, so Sam's coming in person. All right, thank you. So I guess we can just chat while we're waiting. I hope everybody had the opportunity to get out and enjoy this weekend. Wonderful weather. I am hoping that wasn't our summer. I guess I'll take a minute to go over the agenda today so that all of you know the order of what we will be doing. After interviewing for we have one more interview after this one for the Historical Building and Site Commission, and then we have some people here who are ready to present their draft of the Sustainable and Energy Action Plan, which is quite a document, I might add. Very impressive. So I'm sorry I didn't get through it all, but I did glance through it and read through the executive summary, and that was great. And then we'll have the Home Builders Association concerns and do an update with what's going on with them, and then a fiscal year 24 budget and lands and building project discussion, followed by the agenda review. So here we have, this must be Mr. Sam Marsh.
It is.
All right, great. I am Valerie Lovelace. I am acting mayor today as Sarah Bristol is out of town. So, Sam, I'm going to start you off and have you tell me why you are interested in being on the Historical Sites and Building Commission.
Got a lot of different reasons, but my occupational background is I'm a journalist, so I chronicle history pretty much on an everyday basis. I love history. I grew up in Grants Pass. In fact, my grandparents came here on a train, and my great-grandparents in 1911, and my grandmother with them. My grandfather, Frank Nandy, had several restaurants in this community, including Nandy's Steakhouse, Nandy's Cafe, and several others. And I just have a really strong passion for Grants Pass, and I'd like to see the downtown area stay exactly as it is.
Okay, great. So what kind of experience do you have working, say, on a committee, collaborating with other people on a commission of this sort?
Well, I just recently served on the steering committee for Grants Pass High School as a parent member. I've been involved in a lot of different groups, from sports. I was a teacher for several years. I was a real estate agent prior to that. So I just feel like I have a pretty good balanced background to take on this position.
Okay. What do you see as important issues of preservation that confront us in the next few years, and why are they important?
Well, obviously, the economy is a big deal. Obviously, you want to keep your anchor businesses in the downtown area that have brought people here to begin with. And so I think the economy is obviously big. Public safety is huge, especially with the situation we have with the unhoused population right now. It's a big job, no real solution yet, but we're working on that, I know. And I have a little bit of insight from covering you good people and what you do every day as far as the government's concerned. But I think public safety, probably the economy. Obviously, you don't want empty storefronts downtown. I think the Rogue River is what brings a lot of people to Grants Pass, and things like our really neat downtown area, historic, is what brings them back. And I'd like to see that continue.
Okay, I'll ask one more question, and I'll turn it over to my helpers here. What are your goals as a commissioner in the next, during your term? Do you have any specific goals that you'd like to see done?
Well, obviously, there's a learning curve, so I'd want to learn a little bit about, well, a lot about what goes on in the downtown area, but I have some knowledge of what the commission does. I realize that the council often refers things to the commission, such as the remodel that's being done on the Downtown Welcome Center, even the parklets. You want to see that they're consistent with what the HBSC likes to see in the downtown area, and not something really extravagant or different that's going to change the look of the downtown.
Okay, great. So I'm going to ask if any other counselors have any questions at this time. Rob.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. So you've obviously been around Grants Pass forever, and I'm just wondering if there's anything that's come up recently that spurred your interest to be on the Historic Commission. You've known about the commission for years. I'm just wondering why now did you decide to apply?
Well, I've gotten to the point now where I've got a little more extra time. I've raised my 3 kids that been the 4th generation of my family to go through Grants Pass High School. Still have one there, but I have more free time. I want to serve my community in a different capacity than what I do already, which is in the journalistic sense. I'd like to get in there and help preserve the downtown area and make it look smashing as it does now.
Okay, well, thank you very much. On Wednesday night, the council will be making a decision, and you can call in, not call in, but you can watch us on TV, or you will get notified after the meeting as to who the council selects. So,
Okay.
thank you very
much for your time.
You bet. And we have one more, and this is for a position of someone who is a member of the Historical Society. So with that...
The number you have dialed has not been recognized.
Oops. So is this Arden we're calling now?
Hello?
Hello, Arden. This is Valerie calling. I am taking the place of Sarah today because she's gone. So I'm
okay.
here. Yeah, so I'm here to ask you some questions, and then we'll have questions from the council as well. So I'm not going to ask you if you're familiar with the historic district and landmark list because you probably have them imprinted in your brain. But I will start you off by asking you to describe the role of the Historical Building and Site Commission and what a commissioner does, for those of us here in the audience.
Okay, that's good to hear your voice. And I'm sorry I'm not there. I woke up feeling like I was contagious. I thought, I'm not going to do that. So yeah, I'm happy to be on the phone with you. So, okay, you want the purpose of HBSC?
Yeah, what the role of the commission is and that of a commissioner.
Okay, so the main purpose of a historical HBSC, let's see, okay, to me the main purpose is preserving a large part of Grants Pass's heritage. And, you know, also HBSC is under state land use laws like the Planning Commission and the Council. So that's probably, in a nutshell, the main purpose is preserving a large part of Grants Pass's heritage.
Okay.
So what we do as commissioners is we review, say a person comes in who owns a historic building and wants to do some outside alterations. So he'll come before us to review the plans. So we will review the plans, and we do this to make sure the alterations won't impact the integrity of a historic building. So we review that with them, and we offer help and guidance during all of the meeting, and that's what mostly we do. We also research and designate new Grants Pass landmarks, and we make decisions about construction, new buildings, and demolitions in the historic district. How much time do I have on this?
Well, we can answer. You're doing a great job.
Okay.
It's very educational for me, actually, even. So what do you see as important issues of the preservation that confront us and will at this time and in the next few years? And why are those important?
See, the most important preservations that confront us, the city, in the next. Okay, one is to me, the most important, and I think it's keeping the integrity, the originality of our historic district and its streetscape. I think that's critical. It's very important. It's also important to have tourists see that the historic district is authentic and not some kind of a Disneyland replication. So the authenticity, the originality, integrity, I'd say, of our historic district is the most important thing confronting us.
Okay, thank you, Arden. And I have one more question. How do you see the relationship between historic preservation and economic development?
Historic. You know, I've always seen that as complementary. The historic district, like the Golden Goose, it generates millions with tourism and its activity. Locals love to shop there too. A revitalization, when cities revitalize their downtown into a historic preservation, you know, that gives a positive image to maybe future industries. It creates service, retail jobs, and it helps the tax base. So that's where I see it's very complementary, the two of them.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to see if there's any other questions from the council members. Go ahead, Joel.
Hi, Arden. You've already addressed some of this question, but I thought I'd take advantage of your expertise while you're here in front of your community. You know, we can only learn from the past, we don't learn from the future. And what do we need to learn from the historic past here in our community? And what is the relationship of the committee to that lesson? How do you feel about it?
So are you talking about preserving the integrity of our heritage?
It's however you want to define it, and that certainly is a part of it.
Okay. That's what I think our main purpose is for Historical Building and Sites Commission, interacting with the community. We also, you know, we like to let people know what we're doing and, you know, publicize it. We're having a great thing going now with an overlay to preserve the integrity of Longridge and Washington area. That's a big one. We've expanded the historic district and preserved those buildings. So I think the community appreciates that. And so I don't know if does that answer your question, Joel?
You know, whatever you say, that's the answer, Arden. Okay?
Oh, okay. I hope I answered you.
Yeah, you did your best, which was good. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome, Joel.
Okay, thank you very much, Arden. We appreciate your calling in and not spreading your germ. And
Yes.
you know the ropes. On Wednesday night, the meeting, we will make a decision and then notify whoever is chosen after that. So once again, thank you for your time, and thank you for
Okay.
reapplying.
Okay, nice talking to you. Thank you,
You bet.
and bye-bye.
Okay, so that brings us, I do have a question, Karen. There are 3 positions open. I know the last time there was 2. Was it, there are 2 positions for the citizen at large and then 1 for the historical, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll vote on that on Wednesday night. So moving along, next up on our agenda, we have the draft of the Sustainable and Energy Action Plan. So let's see who is, all right, looks like Jason's going to lead us off.
I am going to introduce.
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
You did sign it?
I could have done that one too, but
Oh, do you want to sign it, Rick?
maybe.
You didn't mark his name off.
But Allegra was going to have a tougher time with that one once I introduced him. Thank you, Council. So today we are here to talk about the city's draft Sustainable and Energy Action Plan. And this supports the Council's goal of leadership, Objective 3, Action 5, which spawned out of strategic planning a couple of years ago, and that was to create a climate action committee. So in 2021, the Council adopted a 3-star goal, which was to initiate the creation of a Sustainability and Energy Action Task Force. That task force was formed in November of 21 and was tasked with creating an energy action plan that focused on city operations, not the city as a whole. The plan will provide recommendations to you on actions that can be taken to reduce the city's greenhouse gas emissions, increase our energy resilience, and reduce potential future energy costs. So to help facilitate this, city staff applied for and was awarded services from Resource Assistance for Rural Environments, RARE, which is a division of the AmeriCorps program, to act as the task force liaison and to facilitate the plan creation. And that brought us Allegra Starr, who alongside of the 12 task force members have spent thousands of hours crafting this plan for your consideration. And I want to say I've worked with a lot of committees since I've had this role, and this is probably the hardest working task force I think I have seen. We meet monthly, they're meeting weekly. And they've been working in pods, they've been doing all of this work, and they are the ones that have created that plan that you have up on the dais for your consideration. And so with that, I'm going to hand off to Allegra Starr, and I will come back at the end to kind of wrap up and talk about next steps.
Thank you, Jason, and thank you, Council, for making this investment in long-term sustainability and energy planning and allowing me to present the product of that investment to you here today. I also want to take a moment to thank all the wonderful members of city staff who took the time to provide both myself and the task force with information on city operations and feedback as we developed our recommendations. And I, of course, want to give special thanks to the incredibly dedicated group of citizens who served on this task force and made this plan possible. So, as Jason said, my name is Allegra Starr, and I'm an AmeriCorps member with the RARE program. I graduated from Willamette University with a triple major in policy, economics, and public health, and minors in sustainability and environmental science. And prior to this, I was working at the state level doing sustainable economic policy work, focusing on rural communities. So, I'm incredibly proud of this amazing plan that we've put together, and a lot of work has gone into it, and I hope that you are as happy with it as we all are. Among other things, this plan contains a very thorough analysis of the city's energy usage and projections for the future, and 5 goals which we are asking that you adopt as city policy, and an abundance of different recommendations to how to achieve those plan goals. There's a full list on page 102 if you want to see the quick rundown. So these are all opportunities that can save the city anywhere between over $912,000 to nearly $2 million annually by 2045. They also build greater resilience in city operations and will help us to achieve net zero emissions by 2045. So these 5 goals, they're the only aspect of the plan, again, that we're asking council to vote on. And goal 1 is to manage energy costs. This is keeping energy spending within 30% of 2021 energy spending through the year 2045, which might seem like a long ways off, but that's really just over 20 years away. And goal 2 is to improve energy resilience, allowing Grants Pass to continue to provide essential services, even in the event of grid failure or natural disaster. Goal 3 is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions incrementally over the next 20 plus years following these benchmarks. 65% of 2021 by 2030, a reduction of 75% by 2035, and a reduction of 90% by 2040, and reaching net zero by 2045. These goals may seem pretty ambitious, but with Pacific Power's own reductions, we're actually talking about much smaller reductions on the part of the city. And then goal 4 is to integrate sustainability, which we've defined as economic, social, and environmental stewardship into all city decision-making. And goal 5 is to establish a standing sustainability and energy advisory committee to monitor progress, advise on new technologies as they emerge, and engage in citizen outreach. So there's a lot of information contained in this plan. And I'm going to dive into a small portion of it to illustrate the feasibility of the goals that I just listed, and how this plan's recommendations help to accomplish them. But as I'm throwing all this data your way, and I do apologize if I get a little too into the data, all I really want you to take away from this is that these 5 goals are quite feasible, and that pursuing them presents an incredible opportunity to the city to save significant quantities of money and to ensure longevity of city operations. So looking at that first goal of managing energy costs, I want to show this graph to you guys that we came up with our projections. Let's see, where's the laser here? So here we've got our energy cost and our years starting in 2021. 2021 is the year that you'll see as our baseline year for all of the data that we're going to look at. And here we've got our no projects line showing the increasing cost as time goes on. And this is our target. And right now, with just the most modest modeling we did, this is already what we're anticipating with the implementation of a modest quantity of our planned projects. So our current energy cost totals at around $1.6 million annually. And accounting for the standard inflation rate, that's how we get this increasing line here. It's the standard inflation rate and population growth. And so we've projected an increase to over 53%. So just over $3 million by 2045 without project implementation. This presents a serious problem for the city.
Joel, microphone.
You got to use your microphone, Joel.
What was the percentage increase you assumed on energy costs going into the future?
Yes, it was an increase of just over 53% by 2045.
So what would that be on an annual basis?
That would be about just over $3 million annually.
And that as a percentage? Oh, no, okay, that's okay.
As a,
I'll
sorry, as
figure
a
it out.
percentage
I'll
of
figure it out.
current spending?
How-
It's just like 2.5%, yeah.
2.5%, okay, thank you.
Okay, and so then the most modest models included project recommendations have been projected to produce annual savings of over $912,000, reducing projected 2045 costs to $2.1 million. Achieving the savings we modeled is primarily dependent on our development of renewable energy generation. So when you look at this is again cost and then the year, and this is juxtaposing our having no projects implemented, and then again, that more modest model of planned project implementation. And I'll get into some of the more aggressive modeling in just a second. So, as I said, achieving the savings that we're showing here, this difference is mainly dependent on the development of renewable energy generation. And some of the most significant projects factoring into this discrepancy is going to be found on page 85 of the plan. So the significant discrepancy in these numbers that I'm giving you of $912,000 to nearly $2 million can mainly be found in differences in the size of the renewable energy generation sites, most notably the Merlin landfill solar recommendation. So there's an annual savings generated at this site alone of between $220,000 to around $1.2 million, dependent on a substation upgrade. And so that substation upgrade is what led to this divergence in these two models. So while the Merlin landfill site is around 300 acres, the existing substation at that location could only support about 8 to 10 acres of solar. However, that substation could be upgraded. We've spoken with Pacific Power, and they said they would help to pay for such an upgrade to support a larger solar fields installation. And ran some pretty impressive preliminary calculations that show an estimated payback period of around 5 years, which could become even more impressive given grant funding eligibility. So as a previously contaminated site, a solar field installation on a landfill would be eligible not only for renewable energy generation funding, but also for brownfield redevelopment dollars. So energy savings, like the kinds a project like this would generate, could serve to reduce pressure on the general fund and or reduce the need to increase utility billing rates over the years. And you can see in this graph here just how much of a difference you're talking about. Here you've got the cost and again years, and now we've got no projects versus planned projects versus the implementation of this Merlin field on a larger scale. And so these 2 years, we don't have that field, and then here you start seeing the difference that would make and just how significant a change we're talking about there. So in meeting our resilience goals, this is really about our ability to operate emergency services without outside resources and having a little bit more energy independence. So one of the many projects that contributes to this is the conversion of our rolling stock. So this is perhaps the most urgent project in the plan. This is because it contributes to this goal, but also all of our other goals pretty sizably. And there's a lot of availability in funding right now. But more than anything, it's this importance to resilience that makes this so key. And its ability to allow us to avoid the high and volatile liquid fuel markets, which we can see illustrated in just, if you look at page 116 of the plan in particular, you can see the multi-year comparisons of energy costs. And just how much in just this past year we saw a 40% increase in spending on liquid fuels despite using about the exact same amount. So this recommendation also does not mean adding a new budget line item, but only slightly increasing the upfront cost of existing ones. And it's projected to contribute an overall 584 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent reductions by 2045, which is nearly 40% of all reductions we're hoping to achieve by 2045. And this conversion also would not involve all city vehicles. When you look at this graph, it's showing the usage and the purpose. We're mainly going to be targeting, starting with our general purpose vehicles. And you can see by the years, that would also be how we're planning on replacing vehicles, would be in the models that we've done. So you can see that we divided it into general, police patrol, construction, special, and fire apparatus, and that's how we determined which would be convertible and when it would be able to be converted. So the savings projected from this as well would reach nearly $350,000 annually in avoided gasoline and diesel fuel costs. Okay, as we look at reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, we can see that this is the reductions we're anticipating with no project implementation. That reduction is going to be occurring mainly because of Pacific Power's reductions. And then this line here is our target in gray, and planned projects, again, that's the most modest model, are in green. So our current greenhouse gas emissions total less than 4,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. Accounting for changes in grid electric emissions as well as population growth, we're projecting a decrease of about $65% to 1.5 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent by 2045 without project implementation. And that's that decrease again, the bars. Using the most moderate model, project recommendations have been projected to produce an additional emissions reduction of 35% overall by 2045. So that additional reduction of 35% is the difference here. Reducing projected 2045 annual emissions to a net negative of 57.1. And that's where you end up right there. Projects not factored in or those that are likely to be underestimated can address the 2040 gap, which you can see here where our planned projects do not quite dip below the target, meeting any potential shortfalls between what is projected and what happens. So diving in a little bit more into our emissions projections, you can really see the contribution that Pacific Power's conversion has even further. All of this light blue, that's electricity, and you can see how the emissions generated by electricity really start to plummet. And one of the things that we can also see from this graph is how much transportation contributes from what Pacific Power is not contributing. So that's all that green, this dark green that's gasoline, and the gray that's diesel to a lesser extent. A full breakdown of the contributions to these reductions can be found on page 85 of the plan. Breaking these down even further, this is one of the main tools that we used in evaluating strategies for emission reductions and illustrating the feasibility of those as we developed our recommendations. So all of this electricity in light blue, as we look towards reaching our net zero goals, we can assume that that's going to be done away with by Pacific Power's own conversion. The dark blue here from our water restoration facility will be largely, if not entirely, eliminated by the recent installation of the new digester heat exchanger, and the majority of emissions from gasoline can be targeted by vehicle conversion and policy changes to reduce employee commuting. Carbon dioxide sequestration from the Grants Pass urban forest, shown here in light green, can serve to offset much of the rest. Thank you for bearing with my little dive into the data, and I hope it helped to illustrate the tremendous potential of this plan and the feasibility of its goals. With that, I will turn it back to Jason.
Is there any questions while we're here? Can you just hold on a minute, because you just never know, you might have some questions.
We
or
will bring
comments.
her right back up if I
Okay,
could
fine.
finish up
You
real
bet.
quick.
Okay.
Because I think it will come back full
Okay.
circle, and you definitely want to ask her questions,
That's what,
not me.
that's why I didn't want her to sit down.
Yes. So I just want to wrap this up for you, and then you can definitely bring Allegra back up to answer all your questions. There are no direct costs associated with adopting this plan. That's really key. Where the cost will come in as we start to implement these projects. As Allegra stated, there are a lot of projects that are identified. Many of them are eligible for grant funding, which we would be pursuing. The projects that were selected were chosen because of their cost-effective nature, most of which had very short payback periods. And nearly all of the projects that were identified are going to be eligible for at least one source of currently available grant funding, if not more than one source. And also, as Allegra stated, that grant funding is currently fairly abundant right now, although that will start to decrease as we move forward into the future. Also, it needs to be noted that most of these projects will require further study. So we would be recommending that as you direct staff, should you adopt the plan to move forward, that we do feasibility studies, especially on some of the larger projects like the solar fields, any of the conversion projects at water or wastewater, as those will have a much larger impact on city operations. And so the next step would be, we do currently have this plan scheduled for your council for consideration on May 17th. With the following alternatives. Bring the plan forward, including the formation of the standing committee. Bring this plan forward without the formation of a standing committee, or provide feedback to the group for revisions and consider at a future date. And again, I just want to make note that this task force has done just a Herculean lift on creating the projects, crunching all of the data that it took to come up with our actual greenhouse footprint today. I'm really proud and pleased of the work that they have done. So with that, we open it up to questions.
Okay, and I would also like to say that I'm quite impressed with the data collection. I know how data collection is not an easy task. I am on the MPO, and I know that catching greenhouse gas and all those numbers is not an easy thing. So obviously you have a well-versed data person. So that's wonderful. Okay, with that, I'll open up to questions. So Joel, I'll start with you.
So I had a couple questions. One of the things that's obviously missing is the capital investment costs. And what I hear is there's no capital investment costs because it's all going to be grants. And is that what I'm hearing? So there are capital investment costs.
So
I see the savings in operational costs. I don't see the capital investment costs.
yeah, so what we're saying is that there's no capital costs associated with the adoption of this plan. Mm-hmm. We're not saying that there wouldn't be costs associated with further progress made in determining what exactly would be implemented.
Yeah.
But the adoption of this plan, which is it's just those 5 goals, there's no cost associated with that. And we're saying that there is a lot of grant funding available for when it comes time to choose projects to implement. And we are aware that there will be costs. We don't want to be estimating cost at this point in time for any particular project, because that is absolutely likely to change by the time it would become implemented.
So, I just put in a solar system in my house, and there are capital investment costs even with the tax incentives, and it affects the rate of return, and it can be fairly low depending on
Absolutely.
how high those capital investment costs are. And so if we adopt something without knowing those capital investment costs, it's kind of like winking at each other, I think, because I wouldn't put a solar system on my house without knowing what those capital investment costs are.
Right, and we're not recommending that any of that be done without knowing those costs ahead of time. As Jason mentioned, each project would have to have a feasibility study, and that would go into it is what actually are we looking at our return.
So the same thing then, I have the same comment on carbon production. There was the energy chaos that has been produced by Ukraine, and people are looking at all sorts of things, not only here, but in Europe and other places. And they talked about the break-even point for carbon on electric vehicles is about 60,000 miles And that's when when the electric car starts to produce total overall, including the cost of production and operation, not just operation, so that it becomes carbon neutral at 60,000 miles and then starts to save carbon. What I see here before me is just the operational part. And what I've come to understand in the production of the solar industry, which is obviously needed, it's very carbon intensive, much more so than producing petroleum-based vehicles, and it takes a while to build that back. What you have here is true for the operational expenses of carbon. It doesn't include the capital investment costs of carbon. And so your figures are very good for operational, and they're true. They need to be tempered by that capital investment costs of producing this different technology, which my daughter is also involved with as a mechanical engineer up in Portland, so she keeps me abreast of that. And so we're just seeing one part of the picture here that is being painted for us that doesn't include the capital investment costs of either money up front or carbon produced up front. And then the other thing that goes with it in terms of this energy chaos is the rare minerals involved and the mining involved and the associated costs with that. And it's not neutral. It's not neutral by any means, either in carbon or on the environment. And China has 90% of that market cornered, China and Russia. So it's going to be an interesting ride. It's not going to be the total answer. It certainly has a part, but the document to me is missing those two important factors, and that's what is the capital investment cost without grants, and then see how many grants we need, because I mean, if you got my house, I'm figuring with the grants returns about 6 to 7% if I use a lot of electricity. If I don't have those grants, it returns a lot less. And then the capital investment costs of carbon, of producing it, and what that impact is on our planet. They talked about the increase in rare mineral production would have to be 10-fold, I think, or maybe even 20-fold to follow the model of Norway, where we went all solar. So, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Yes, Vanessa.
Thank you, Allegra, for that presentation today. I was hoping maybe you could spend a minute talking about the benefits of increased resiliency for both water treatment, wastewater treatment, and public safety services.
Yeah, those were the two specific areas for resilience that we focused on because we felt they were the most crucial of anything. And they had the most opportunity for resiliency. And especially here in Grants Pass, where we are located in a pass, the need to have energy that is local and can power those facilities was something that we really hoped to try and target, and trying to preserve those essential services, and wastewater being one of those most crucial, and 911 call centers and public safety being the other. And trying to keep it so that we could have those operations continue, even in the event of natural hazards. I'm familiar with the stories that have happened in other more rural communities when they have not had power, and they were relying on diesel generators, and the diesel generators ran out of fuel, and they were going around town trying to harvest diesel from wherever they could because that was their only source. I'm not suggesting that we eliminate that, but having diverse sources of fuel is essential to resiliency.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Yes, Dwayne?
Yeah, I just got a couple of questions. You know, I'm not an expert in any of this, and Joel kind of brought up one of my things, but on this page 141, sorry, are you recommending that we get rid of natural gas? Is that what you're asking there?
I believe that one second, let me get to where you are.
For buildings and stuff like that, new construction, are you recommending that?
On 41, or you said
141.
141. I'm seeing methodology on 141.
So I just didn't know, is that or is that part of your recommendations to get rid of natural gas for new construction?
It is part of our recommendations to assess natural gas usage based on our own solar generation. Because if we've brought down electricity costs, then it will no longer make sense from a cost standpoint to be using natural gas in place of electricity at all points in time. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
I guess a little bit, but I said for like new construction for homes and stuff like that. Are you asking
Oh,
about?
no. So this is still a municipal plan too.
Just for the city stuff?
Yes, this is just, everything in here is just for the city. There's nothing that would impact homeowners whatsoever.
Okay. And then, are there U.S. products only for solar that are only made U.S.?
I do not know the answer to that question. I'm sure we can get back to you on that though.
Okay. And then this is just a question that popped in my head because I'm very.
Go for it.
How do you measure the greenhouse gases in Grants Pass? Grants Pass only.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So that was a really long process. And there's a lot of that in the methodology, but I recognize that gets into the nitty-gritty. But essentially, there's a wonderful tool that the EPA came out with, and we used functions from them, but then we adapted them so that they could produce the exact graphs we wanted and break things down exactly how we wanted them broken down and onto the general categories that they had. But you input certain pieces of information, and there's different functions that output what that would be in terms of metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. So that includes, agriculture, which for us was pretty insignificant. It's just like the amount of fertilizer we use. It's how many gallons of gasoline and diesel we're using. It's our electricity usage in kilowatt hour factored in with who our provider of electricity is. It's the production of solid waste that we generate. And I'm trying to think what else
How
went into that.
do you eliminate solid waste? Like, I'm a baby in this, so how do you eliminate solid waste?
That is definitely going to be one of the bigger challenges, and that might be one that we need to deal with in large part through the offsetting through our urban forest. That one's going to be more challenging. We recognize that. A large part of our emissions when it comes to solid waste are not actually in the waste itself, but in hauling it. So there's a piece of legislation, the Recycling Modernization Act, that's coming down the pipeline, and that should reduce our hauling emissions considerably, which is actually a pretty significant chunk of our solid waste emissions. And there's one thing that we discussed as well in the task force is that by figuring out new methods for trying to reduce the water weight of the solid waste we haul from our water restoration facility, that would also reduce our emissions considerably. So it's really a lot more in the hauling than you might think.
Because it seems like there was a problem recently or last couple of years about recyclable goods, getting them gone. So how do we deal with that when we're not be able to recycle as much as possible? I recycle a lot at home, but we have 2 trash cans, we separate it all, but some things are not being taken now. So I just don't understand how that factors in here too.
So again, that Recycling Modernization Act would make everything that you can recycle in a larger metro area able to be recycled in more rural communities like ours. And so that will handle that. But a lot of our plan doesn't focus necessarily on recycling alone. It's in, reduction and material selection and, again, hauling. It's in the other things surrounding it, not just do we recycle enough.
Yeah, because it seems like a lot of these products, it's all over the news. You turn on something about how they make solar. It just seems a lot of these products that you want us to use are made in other countries. Are not really made here. So how do you, it's not local. We're getting this stuff from somewhere else. I'm just kind of concerned about that. Is like, we're supposed to be looking at what's good for Grants Pass and obviously environment. So I don't know if that's a question or a statement, but it's kind of concerning. So thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Go ahead, DJ.
Sure. This is an impressive document, and the dozens of questions that I have, I'm finding are answered in this document. But
awesome.
What I wanted to touch on was brownfield redevelopment. That's a big item. What do we do with our brownfields? And you had mentioned opportunity for brownfield redevelopment dollars. I'm curious about those, and then also in talking about the priority matrix that I'm finding here, in that the impact for redevelopment of those brownfields is high and the feasibility is low. Can you talk about that, please?
So the priority matrix was really, when we're talking about feasibility, for the most part, that has to do with, is this a high capital project? So those projects are going to be higher capital. That doesn't make them not feasible. It just means that they're not easy. And so those would require funding to be found, and we'd need to do a larger study, but ensuring that there's going to be a good economic output when it comes time to actually implement a project. But it's not to say that that's not feasible. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And then brownfield redevelopment dollars, is this growing in popularity? Do you have any, I don't know, experience with other communities utilizing dollars like these and actually redeveloping their brownfields? I'm really interested in this.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. There's a lot of different communities that have done many different projects in redeveloping a brownfield. Some are a lot more capital intensive than others. For instance, Bend turned one of their old landfills into an OSU campus. That was extremely capital intensive, and because you have to comply with different safety standards depending on what you're developing it into. A solar field is a lot less because you don't have to meet all those safety requirements. So it's one of the better ways to redevelop a brownfield.
Thank you.
I was just going to ask, excuse me, so is that the project you were talking about, the landfills here, that would have the biggest impact would be to do solar fields and develop solar fields with the Merlin landfill? Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we looked at both Merlin and Foothill. Merlin's the one I highlighted today, but that's just because it was the most complicated, because it had this substation upgrade component and it had this potential for a much larger installation. Foothill would be a much more straightforward project. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from council? All right, well, moving forward, I know that May 17th, this is going to be on a meeting. Am I correct? So you tell us what our next steps are right now. I mean, obviously, this is wonderful, and I totally appreciate you giving references to certain things within the, to go back and check on, because that helps when you have a large document. So next steps, Jason.
Yeah, so at this point, we would be looking for feedback whether you want to bring this back for adoption with all 5 goals, which is the formation of a standing committee to continue where the task force, because the task force, when you adopt this plan, would be disbanded, to continue the work as Allegra stated. They would help with plan identification, feasibility studies, helping to monitor and provide you with regular reports, or to bring the plan forward for adoption without Goal 5, which would be the formation of the standing committee. Or do you have more feedback? As an example, Councillor King raised a couple of issues that he felt were missing that you want us to incorporate and bring back at a later date for consideration.
Okay, any feedback from anybody else here on where we want to go with that? Or do we just need to decide by the 17th? Do you want, it's obviously going to be in a meeting. I don't know if there's any questions.
Yeah, we would bring it back as a resolution.
Okay.
And without direction, we would bring it back with a resolution that could go either way with the standing committee for your decision that night. We were just hoping for some direction today to help dial that in a little bit.
Rick.
I would be in favor of forwarding it to the May 17th meeting and also including the formation of a standing committee.
Joel?
I would support it if we have the upfront capital investment costs displayed both for carbon and for dollars, because if you just look at operational costs, it gives you a false picture. And we can do that with the standing committee or whatever, but I don't put a solar system on my house just looking at my operational costs. I got to look at those capital investment costs. And the other thing I had a question on, and I didn't ask it because it's futuring, but if you're always a step behind, it gets to be kind of expensive, and if you don't anticipate the future. And this is certainly an area, not only if you stuck with solar, it would get even more expensive as you go forward, because those minerals are like nickel. we're not mining it in the United States like out at Nicor, and all the high-grade nickel in the mines have been developed for the most part in the world. So what is the next step beyond that? And it's fusion. And the one thing I don't know in the lifespan of solar versus fusion, you know, how soon that's coming. I don't think any of us know that, but we need to at least ask the question.
Brian.
Thank you. I first want to thank the committee for all of your hard work. It really shows in this plan. I reviewed it over the weekend, and it's quite impressive. So I really appreciate all the work of the committee to put the plan together. I would agree with Councilor Riker to bring it forward to May 17th with the formation of the standing committee, because moving this forward, there is so much to do to implement this plan that having that committee would be instrumental in not putting too much additional burden on staff. And regarding the capital cost concern that Councilor King is bringing up, this is a 20 to 25 year plan, so I feel like it's premature to try to estimate capital costs at this point. This is the plan that will allow us to do feasibility studies that will allow us to get the costs for this specific project. So I don't know that it's appropriate for us to try to estimate capital costs for a 25-year plan right now, especially because fusion's been 10 years away from implementation for 50 years. So, but thank you to the committee, and the plan looks great.
Okay, I would be in favor as well, just because I would hate to get rid of the expertise that put this together, because it is absolutely amazing the amount of data they were able to collect and the information they had. And I'm just assuming if they did that in that amount of time, that they're going to move forward and also be a gift to our city in terms of collecting that data and seeing what there is. But this is a long-range plan. So there we go. Direction, May 17th. See you then.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And once again, thank you all on that Sustainability Task Force. Next on our agenda, we have the Home Builders Association concerns and updates.
Good morning, Mayor, and I guess you're acting mayor and council. We're going to tag team on this presentation for you today. I'm Bradley Clark, and then we got Jason coming in. We have a few other members in the audience here today with the Home Builders Association. So there's a lot of overlap in the topics that were brought up in the letter between community development, finance, public works, the vast majority shared kind of between CD and public works. So I'll start out here and kind of introduce and kind of bring you a little bit up to speed on where we are, and then we've got a few slides in the middle where Jason will come up and talk about the public works items. So the subject and summary today: update the council on the status of the Home Builders Association's list of concerns related to development processes and the development code. And it relates to primarily to those two council goals that are on the screen behind me. So we, in November, received a letter from the recently formed Home Builders Association, and it listed out 19 different topics that are related to a host of things: land development, building, fees, development code. And they included some suggestions and recommendations in there, and I think council received a copy of that last fall. And then in January, I replied with kind of an initial response on where we were at that time. So I think our goal today was really to bring you up to speed. You, of course, on your strategic plan also had having the meeting every other month with the Home Builders Association, and I think this is accomplishing one of those goals of yours. So this table summarizes all of this actually has 20 items. We kind of took the last one and split it into two. They were pretty distinct topics, so there's 20 items here. And this is very much, staff's attempt to kind of just consolidate these things into a format so that you can maybe work with it a little easier, as well as talk about your priorities. There's a lot of work that could be done here, and so one of our hopes is that we will come out of the meeting receiving some specific direction from council on these. The numbers on the left, we just kept them in the same order as what the letter from the Home Builders Association gave to us, so that's the order. There's no other particular order on here. The second column, the type of action, is footnoted at the bottom there with CC. There's a number of those. I think we had 15 out of the 19 that require some kind of code change in order to really implement these. The S, there's a couple of those that would require potentially some kind of state level intervention or state level change in ORS. The PC policy process, those could likely be accomplished with more of an internal policy change without city council having to actually change the code. The I is interagency coordination. That's, we only have a few of those. Obviously, you're going to have a lot of interagency coordination on most of these, but these were the ones that it really came to the top. Those are the items that are going to really require a lot more time intensive between city staff and other agency staff. We had 3 of the 19 would not require some type of city council action. So that third column there, at least from our perspective, so you can see the majority would need, in order to implement them fully, would need some kind of council action. The degree of difficulty, again, is from our staff standpoint, in order to take these really kind of to the end, the amount of research that would be needed, the amount of interagency coordination on those that had that, some level of research on writing any code amendments, those kinds of things. And then the last column is sort of where we're at as of last week. So the next few slides are going to kind of zero in on some of the main items that had some kind of work that was done between the January letter that staff submitted and now. So on the first one, the final plat approvals, we did talk to the county surveyor, Peter Allen, as well as the county clerk, Rhiannon Henkels, and asked if they were aware of any state changes related to doing electronic signatures instead of the wet signatures on final plat Mylars. We didn't find anything. They weren't aware of any state level change on that. The county would not accept for recording purposes a document that had both. So you'd have to either have 100% electronic or 100% wet, so wet signatures. The second bullet there is really, there are some best practices overall out there. One of those would be to publish a very user-friendly kind of guide that would help people that are doing land divisions to walk them through the process. It doesn't really get to the specific concern that was in the Home Builders Association letter, but if we did have that, that may, kind of give more realistic timeframes up front. So if you're a property owner and you're just wanting to do a basic partition, that may provide some help. But otherwise, the process that the city's using for signing plats is pretty uniform and shared across most jurisdictions. The planner strips, item number 3, You know, we have a lot of data on this that we can pull both from the city's history when, since before we required planter strips and after. There's also a lot of, you know, white papers, a lot of research out there related to the safety benefits, to the maintenance issues that are related to planter strips. So if this is something the council wants to do, we can certainly pull that together. Also, we have the Stormwater Management Manual and the ordinance that you're going to be seeing this summer, and there is a direct correlation there between the planter strips and the stormwater rules. So next steps would require direction by council and potentially allocating resources to do more of that research. So the next 3 or 4, I guess I'll ask Jason to come up and talk. These are really more focused on public works.
So this was item 4 in the report, and that was to consider council adopting a policy that would transfer ownership of stormwater retention facilities, which are currently required as portions of development today, and take over the O&M of those facilities. This would come, we would definitely want to re-examine our current stormwater rate to ensure that the utility was adequately funded to handle that extra maintenance duty. The other thing is our current code does allow for that transfer as of today. So should you decide that that's the direction that you want, the code already exists for the city to accept ownership of those structures. We would recommend, though, bolstering in the code the standards for construction of those facilities to ensure that the city was not accepting facilities that were going to be very maintenance intensive, that they were constructed well, and that they were on an independent piece of property and not maybe located in an easement in the back of a property or something like that. But this one is in a position where you would have to do very little to update the policy to make that change should council choose to do so. On private streets, this one, we currently, as policy and in our standards, do not allow water in private streets, with very few exceptions. We do allow them for the extension of fire service, but all water meters must be in the public right-of-way. Service meters will not be allowed in easement, and that's per section 203.3.1 of our water standards. So this one would require quite a bit of change, both in code and in our standards, which is just policy. We do recommend continuation of this practice, and that helps to ensure that we are not working on private property. Even with strong easements, it's been our experience that homeowners are never, that it's hard to restore it to their expectations when we're just working in an easement not within the right-of-way. Is this one mine too?
It's kind of both.
I was going to say.
I think I can take that one. Yeah. So the fee in lieu, there was, a policy that the city adopted that was outside of the municipal code that really established kind of the basis for how fee in lieu would work. We experienced, I think, a period of time there where there was some projects that I don't think really got fully interpreted according to that policy correctly. But I think just prior to this letter being received, I think we had kind of identified that and worked that out. So I think we're administering that as it was originally intended. Hopefully that addresses the concerns of the HBA, but certainly happy to talk more about that. The second piece of this one is the Americans with Disabilities Act, and related to when you have improvements along the frontage of a project and you hit kind of a terminus of a sidewalk. If you're on a county road, a county maintained road, they actually require the construction of a ramp that goes from where that sidewalk dead ends over to connect onto the shoulder of the road. We have not been requiring that. So that's a difference, and again, if you're building on a jurisdiction where Joe City County has the road, that's been interpreted that way. If you're building on a street where the city has the jurisdiction, we have not been requiring that. So I think that's where we're getting at with the concerns of the HBA. Maybe there's more, but that we did have one meeting with the county staff, county engineer, and the county public works director after we received their letter. At the outcome of that was essentially we interpret the ADA rules one way, we interpret them the other. We haven't received any other legal input on that, but that's kind of where it stands. Do you have anything else, Jason, on that?
No, you
Okay.
summarized it perfectly. So this is water and sewer easements. This would allow for the installation of a water and sewer service to cross a single property to attach to the second property. So in other words, my water line and my sewer line would cross Councilor Riker's property as opposed to having to do extensions in the adjacent street. This is one that we would advocate against. We have dealt with several just in the last few years, and even though a private easement existed for that service line crossing the private property, the two property owners were not the original property owners by many generations, and they didn't like each other, and the repair of the water line was problematic, and they ended up in court just to get the water line repaired. And unfortunately for the poor person that this occurred to, he didn't have an alternative route to go with the water line, so he had to go back to the original location. It also would potentially lead for an inequality for that second property, that it actually would be like the third property in line. When they finally go to develop, we still have to extend the water and sewer to get back there. It's a potential. Also confusion for our field crews by standards. Water meters front the property to which they serve. This would lead to the water meter and the situs address being different potentially. So the meter would be on property 123 First Street, but the actual house is actually 456 B Street because we've crossed another property and it's around the corner. So we would kind of avoid this one.
Tree deposits, council had already kind of talked about this. We think everyone agreed this is pretty low-hanging fruit. We put that code amendment together. March 22nd, UAPC held their hearing, and then you have your hearing on May 3rd, and that would repeal 100% the requirement to do tree deposits. Utility extensions, this relates somewhat, and the HBA may have some other ideas on this that weren't expressed in the letter, but in terms of finding, other opportunities for the city to leverage extensions of those utilities in gaps so that it can kind of open up some opportunity for more development. We have the one project that you already approved using some of the 1.6 million ARPA money. And then just a few weeks ago, you approved another, I think it was around $160,000 grant for the same project that would extend it north. So those are the two that right now you have seen and given authorization for. We have the RFP active right now for another, I think, 6 weeks or something like that to see if we can, get some other landowners, developers who might be interested in tapping into this funding. So we'll see what happens out of that. And then the other piece to this one is incentives. There was a few examples of incentives that were given in the HBA letter: waive reimbursement district setup fee, simplify the process to upsize public mains, and then there was a few other good examples there. Excuse me. So these would require council direction, to really look to see if those are incentives that you want to look at. Mainly the research being, the offsetting of the revenues. Most of these, if the city was to proceed with doing them ourselves, where's the revenue source, things like that. The zoning transition overlay, you held a meeting in February where you gave some direction on that. We're proceeding with the repeal of the zoning transition overlay that would eliminate those zones. You talked about a grace period at that meeting that would give property owners a period of time to, basically reconsider. We only received 11 property owners who said, yes, we want to retain that higher density zone. So there's about 60 others that are in that R3 or R4 zone that we are going back to and basically saying, you have the option. But then there's also maybe others that maybe they're not ready for 6 months. And I think that was the concern of council at the time, was that you didn't want to just 100% shut the door on the opportunity to do an upzone. Because as a result of this, they will all revert back to some kind of lower density zone, or from a GC2 to just a general commercial zone. So that's what happened in February. We've been working with Augustus to prepare legally defensible language for this grace period. It gets, we just want to make sure, obviously, anything that we put out there to the public in terms of giving that period of time is legally defensible. Augustus was out the month of April, so we've been unable to kind of finalize that up. But we do have the letters being sent to 60 owners who did not reply to that October 2022 letter, giving them that option. We are proceeding with the actual ordinance to repeal that. We have right now it's a June 28th Urban Area Planning Commission. And then an August 2nd City Council. So that can kind of run tandem with working with property owners on the rezone option. So we don't think that that proceeding with the ordinance to take it out, to take the zoning transition or zoning transition overlay away, prevents us from working with the property owners to upzone their property. I think that we can get it off the books and then continue to work with the owners at the same time. The middle housing code update is proceeding. That was also mentioned in the HBA letter. That, as you may recall, you had your public hearing to adopt locally the middle housing code. Because of the concerns that were raised there about the zoning transition overlay, you closed your hearing and then you remanded it back to the zoning commission, to the planning commission. They talked about it last week. They have it on their agenda again next week to talk about. So that's proceeding. Landscape standards. The Urban Tree Advisory Committee met with Justin in January. City Council held your workshop on March 20th to discuss those. There was some HBA members in attendance there. This deals with kind of two issues. One is the structural soils requirement for trees, and then the other piece is the 50% canopy coverage that's required for commercial parking lots. So we have that mostly drafted, and unless there's some concerns today that you bring up, we're going to proceed with the public notice for that June 28th Planning Commission meeting. And then solar setbacks, Planning Commission already held their public hearing April 12th. That removes the solar setback section that we currently have and replaces it with a more streamlined, takes away some of the technical calculations. There's still some requirement for that, but we will bring that to you on May 17th. So here's a few potential next steps on this topic. Council can prioritize those that are pending or not started. Based on HPA and staff input. We can continue to place topics, specific topics on your future bi-monthly meetings. You could have us hold meetings with stakeholders on some of these more complex topics that are in there. And then of course any other direction that you give us today. In terms of cost implication, it's going to vary a lot depending on which topic. to just continue to do what we're doing. You know, we're really mainly talking about the staff research and time to prepare updates like this. There's not any separate revenue streams identified right now. So that again would kind of depend on the topic, and that would be an advantage of having you know, some of those kind of work groups where we could give you a little bit more detail on what would be involved in terms of the costs. So it's all at your discretion at this point. We're going to continue to proceed on a lot of those items that I just laid out for you today. Council, those are kind of some of the same alternatives for you. So that's what we have.
Anybody have questions at this point from? Okay, go ahead, DJ.
Final plat approval, can you talk a little bit more, I'm using the background, item 1, type of action, having state legislative change implications. What kind of state legislative change would kind of get in the way of honing that final plat system?
To just hone, there wouldn't be. We were just talking about acceptance of electronic signatures on a plat. Mm-hmm. That's really the only piece that would require the state change.
Okay. There are a couple items on this list that are directly linked to that new stormwater manual, planter strips and stormwater detention, which is right up the alley of state legislative change kind of things. So we're going to have to kind of wait and see, what does this stormwater manual look like? What are the implications for developers in this community? I know that we're finding it very difficult to bring to light what those changes will be and when we can expect those changes to be implemented and what we're going to need to go through to satisfy these new requirements per that manual. So what can we expect as far as information being released on that new stormwater manual?
Yeah, that's a great question, Counselor. Thank you. I just talked to Wade this morning about that. We have a memo that's just about ready to go. We believe we'll probably have it out this week or first part of next week that kind of goes through the highlights. We had done several open forums. It's been a few months back now with what the plan actually is. And then we'll be ready once we get direction from you folks to release a draft of the plan for everybody's review. But we're going to start with that memo, which should be later this week or next week. I'm looking to Wade. He's been out all last week, so I didn't want to overcommit him to getting that out on his schedule.
Another question about stormwater detention. So the current code does allow for transfer of O&M. Is that utilized often? Do you find that that's something that that can be done, because it's contentious when we have stormwater detention and it's privately owned and maintained, and we have potential issues, also implications to the new stormwater manual. So how's that looking?
I will say it's been used a few times before I was in charge. We own several in the Redwood area. Most of the ones that we own were ones that are in these really weird, awkward locations between houses, but it has been utilized.
That's it for questions for now, thanks.
Any other questions? Yes, go ahead, Joel.
So given the steps that are in progress or pending, how much time before we run out of those items before we can start new ones? It doesn't do any good really to prioritize the not started ones if we're not going to get to them for another 2 years. Given the staff that we have and the funding that we have.
Well, we would probably need to talk specifics, like a specific item, because I think, you know, to talk sort of globally, that's going to be a challenging conversation.
Sure.
You know, I mean, we're the ones that are in action, several of those are very close to being done and really aren't going to take much more staff time, to be honest.
Right.
So, you know, we we can give you a more specific estimate, maybe, if that's what I'm hearing you ask for, Councilor.
I'm not sure I'm asking for that. I'm thinking that with the highest priority is obviously those that have already been initiated. And then when those are complete, or when we get down to where we got time to do some more, then we need to have that discussion. I'm not sure right now it's ripe for discussion. I'm just asking the question.
Well, I think some of this too is how you, Councilor Lovelace, want to handle today, because, you know, we have a couple of folks here from HBA, and, you know, if you want to get that dialogue, they may be.
Yeah, I think that's what I'd like to do, is I think I would like to find out, having them seen what these are, bring up to us what their thoughts are and what their priorities, because I think the whole purpose of this is to say, let's get the barriers out of the way and get housing, because we all know we need it. I know, you know, I look at the time, and it's always the time that kills me, because I know we've been on the final plat approvals. You know, I've been talking with the home builders for that for years, and I'm surprised there's not electronic. I think there are other cities that do electronic signing. It's my understanding. So that's why I'm surprised that it's a state thing. But then I don't know anything about it. So I would like to hear from them and hear some of their thoughts on the matter. So I don't know who exactly wants to step up and represent them at this point in time. I'll give you that option.
Good afternoon, council, staff. Justin Gerlitz, member of the Home Builders Association. I first want to start out by saying thank you for taking the time to listen to our initial concerns and addressing them today, and this is the second round. I think that's a very positive thing. I think we're going to need to continue to do this. Something I'm personally finding with the middle housing standards is a lot of this stuff that we're talking about right now, the state's almost forcing us to do. Things that aren't in our current code that say the opposite. So I think as we work through some of these new standards and processes, these conversations are going to need to continue. Versus getting in the weeds today, I think what I would ask of council and staff is that we can continue to have this kind of back and forth, bring up new topics as they come up, address topics or close out topics as they get addressed permanently here. I would request we respond maybe from the Home Builders Association to today's presentation and the topics that we just received from Brad and staff, and then we can just continue this dialogue. So I guess you know, maybe every 2 to 3 months, if we can kind of have some updates that we can provide back to us and provide to council, I think that would go a long ways. You know, right now, I think the most important thing that we're seeing is the housing market is shifting right now. The economy has shifted. None of us really know exactly what that looks like or what it's going to look like, but there's definitely change that's happening and that's on the horizon. And you know, there's some definite advantages to middle housing, multifamily housing, low-income housing, and it kind of all is in the same pot. And I think we're going to need to continue as a city to address our needs as a city. The state right now is pushing a lot of changes. Some of them are helpful, and others I think are going to be more geared toward big metropolitan cities and organizations, which we are not. And I think it's important that we just continue to look at all these housing changes that are coming and our market directly for our city and how we can help the folks in our city the most. So thank you. I appreciate everybody's time. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Yes, go ahead, Dwayne.
Do you have the same handout?
I have Brad's letter, yes.
On this background list, is there things on here that you feel that have not been started that need to be started right away?
Like I said, we'll formally address in more detail some of like the final plat items. I think maybe, thank you. I think maybe we need to get a little more in depth on that. Maybe, I don't think it's just the signatures that are holding it up. I think maybe some checklists and some electronic checklists that the developers and the builders can use in addition to city staff, that we can all be looking at the same information. That would be super helpful. You know, things like the private streets, middle housing has really thrown us for a loop on those. We've always said you can only put 4 houses on this private street and 10 on this private street. And all of a sudden, the state's saying every residential lot in the city can have quadplexes and townhomes and things like that. So all of a sudden, our old rules are just kind of being thrown out the window. And, you know, myself as a consultant, I'm finding myself, clients are coming and saying, what should I do? And I'm for the first time in a long time, I'm going, I'm not really sure. And staff has been really good. Planning staff has been really, really diligent. We've been going back and forth a lot trying to answer some of these questions, but the state doesn't even know right now on some of their, you know, they've created these rules, but we're just now implementing them. So I think just continuing that discussion is super helpful. The jurisdictional thing between the county and the city is continuing to really cause a lot of grief. I'm seeing that directly on my end where the city's saying develop all these roads and subdivisions to city standards, but just because the county has maintenance jurisdiction over some road, you know, they're looking at it more like ODOT looks at it, like I want to move cars, big wide shoulders, you know, fast as possible, ditches, and we're developing the city standards. So there's a definite conflict there. I think that really needs to be addressed. Sounds like maybe through the IGA process or modification of that. The water main thing in the private streets, I think that's coming up even more so now with middle housing, we already put public sewer mains in private streets. It's a requirement. So we have public mains in private streets already. This is just a different private main. And we're finding continuously now as we infill things that hydrants are required way back into sites. We're extending hundreds of feet of water line, and then we're having to put 10 or 12 water services up on the street hundreds of feet away and kind of run them all into the site. It's just not making a lot of sense. But let's see here. I'm really happy to see that the zoning transition overlay sounds like it's moving forward, and hopefully in a positive fashion where people are getting options. Having worked with the middle housing code this year, this not even a year now, 9 months now, zoning, it's almost comical because zoning is almost for anything but single family, almost doesn't exist. Residential is residential, and it's, you know, Rick, see Rick over there. Rick's been a planner his whole career, and all. My whole career, zoning has been so important, what zone it is and how big the lot can be, and all of a sudden the state's now saying, hey, if it's not single family, you can do whatever you want with this kind of really loosely set of rules that's been created. And then code changes are, I mean, I think just globally here for what we're talking about today, the process of changing the codes to modify these items and the speed involved in that or the lack thereof is really important because when we plan projects, you know, whether it be single family, multifamily, subdivisions, whatever, these codes are kind of the gospel to us. You know, we have to follow these codes. And if we are looking down the road and the city's saying, yeah, I think we're going to change the codes in June, and the lots are going to get smaller or the density is going to get higher, and then those things don't happen, now we're stuck with people wanting to build things, waiting. They're saying, hey, I want to build multifamily, but I'm not really sure without this code change how I'm going to do that. And then the code doesn't happen for 6 more months. So I think setting some really clear guidelines on when we say, yes, we're going to change these codes to fix some of these items, and then sticking to that is really, really important from the building side of things. But other than that, again, I just really appreciate everybody taking the time to look through these items and actually change some of these things. It means a lot to the home builders and developers in town, and we'll hopefully definitely want to continue this process on a regular basis.
Thank you, Justin.
Any other questions? Yeah, I was just going to comment that the goal was to bi-monthly, which is every other month, to actually get together and have this conversation. So I appreciate you guys getting together as often as you do so we can have that banter happen a lot faster. Are we currently fully staffed in planning? Okay, because I think in the past that was unfortunately one of the problems that we weren't. So without that, the sad thing to me, and this is a personal opinion, with all the stuff coming down from the state, I see the planning commission, our planning department running around trying to figure out what the state's doing, and there's a lot of lost energy there because they don't know, you don't know, nobody knows, and so and I see it Same thing in transportation. It's kind of the same thing. We don't know, so everybody's trying to figure it out, and there's a lot of lost time. And I would like to see our planning people prioritize our local wants and inspiration more, though, so than the state, personally. So I don't know where to, other than to say that, because what I do want to see happen is that the only people who are going to, I think, get us out of our housing crunch are local developers. I don't see anybody coming in and swooping down in Grants Pass to help. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. Any other comments? Go ahead, DJ.
Sure, I just kind of want to go over those items that we said, just so we're all kind of know what's being said from the home builders and kind of what needs to be received. As far as the checklist for final plat, I think it's a great idea, having sort of a dynamic document that we all refer to on specific projects and what needs to be done to complete. I think that should be just something we can do to hone that system. Private streets and middle housing, that needs an overhaul. We've been asking other municipalities, other experts, and they just simply don't know how to apply middle housing to private street standards, PUDs, et cetera. And we need to get to the point where we're pioneering that effort, right? Because we don't currently understand how it applies, and we have contradictions between old private street codes and new middle housing codes. And how do those mingle? We don't know. We need to pioneer that effort. We need to really understand those implications and start applying those, because that's a really big unknown. City-county jurisdiction issue is problematic, both in maintenance agreements, development agreements. It sounds to me that there's just not a bona fide, understood foundation that everybody stands on about what does maintenance mean, what does development mean, and also in the ADA standards in a standalone sidewalk in the middle of a unimproved frontage street. We really need to work, and it's going to take county and city kind of getting along and talking about those things, but we can definitely do that. Public infrastructure on private streets, I think this is kind of an antiquated private street issue coming in with new density standards. I'd be willing to look into private street standards. What does that mean? Can we create a new hybrid system that it's not quite a private street, not quite a public street, but we can still garner some benefit from private street areas that allow for easier infrastructure, for example, meters on easements on these new areas or private streets in general. Let's see here. Water and sewer easements, I understand that can get difficult from the staff's perspective. However, I'm not willing to kind of drop that conversation. I know that there's incidents where it just makes sense to have this infrastructure go through easements of property. I don't want to see that conversation fall flat. Pursuing incentive examples that the Home Builders Association provide, yes, that's going to take a lot of time, but incentive is everything. We need to get very clever, very inventive on how we incentivize housing. We received a windfall with ARPA, and we've used that wisely, but that's going to go away. And I think we need to poise ourselves to be able to incentivize housing, because I think we all know we need it. Does that more or less boil down the things that we are trying to talk about here today?
Yeah, at a high level, I think that it does. And I do want to comment on, you said a word that really, I hear words and I think, yes, you said pioneering. We need to pioneer our efforts, and R being the important word. We are in a period right now of massive change in land use laws. There's been more change in the last year than there has in my last 20, and that's just clear as day. The state right now obviously doesn't even know exactly how they're going to implement some of these items, but I do know that we are being treated the same way as Portland, Salem, and Eugene because we're a metropolitan planning organization. So with that, I would, I don't know how to put this best, but I think we need to be very active right now in what's best for our community. And I think we need to help guide what the state is doing right now, because I feel if we don't, Portland and Salem are going to guide all things Grants Pass. And I know that there's a lot of items that really aren't going to work well for us. This transportation aspect in one regard, the Portland and Salem want everyone to use mass transit. And that's great, I support mass transit, but we have very limited mass transit in Grants Pass, and we will for a long period of time. So I just ask of council that we really think about what's best for us as these new presentations come forward and these new guidelines and these new regulations. And I think it's going to be important that we push back where it's meaningful for us to push back.
And with that, I'm going to tell you that tonight, May 1st, 6 o'clock, we have our first climate-friendly presentation where they're going to be talking about the climate-friendly zones, which is another thing coming down from the state in terms of where we're going to put housing, and it will affect housing.
Yeah.
So I welcome you to come tonight at 6 o'clock. Any home builders? Yes, Rob.
Yeah, thanks for being here today, Justin. It's, I think, just what, just the kind of thing that I think I need to move these projects forward. But I also, when DJ used the word pioneering, it also caught my ear. And then the question is, though, but then, you know, you kind of use the term, which I would look at as being the opposite of pioneering when you said we need to push back. Well, that's kind of the opposite, you know. So pioneering is being out in front and maybe taking a risk. Pushing back is like letting the state tell us, and then we get in an argument with them that we'll probably lose. So I guess my question is on like the private street thing or anything else, I guess, is, and I guess this is a question for council, and it's a question maybe for staff. How much risk are we willing to take in pioneering? And I think it's a really, it's like it seems like it's a void from what Justin's saying. What I've heard is that it's a void at the state level because they're not really sure and they're not really defining things quickly enough to suit our needs. So, you know, to me, pioneering is taking a risk, or and not a big risk, taking an educated risk, not getting too far out in front of ourselves. But to me, pushing back is maybe the hard way, and I like pioneering is kind of the opposite. So I just, at least that's how I look at it.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate it. But maybe I think maybe there's misunderstanding on that. I don't think we need to. I'm not saying to push back. I'm saying help to guide the change. And help to guide it for our needs here on a smaller scale than Portland. I say Portland, Salem, and Eugene because to me those three communities, metropolitan organizations, are very different than the Southern Oregon communities. Even Bend is very different than those communities up north. And right now, what I find is when there's a lack of information and a lack of direction, we've got a high-level direction that's been provided to us from the state on many things lately, housing and you know being a big part of that. We're asking the questions, and like I said, planning staff has been great. You know, it is nice that we have a principal planner here now, and I feel like we're able to have more dialogue. And they're asking the state. You know, we're having discussions. We're going, hey, we don't have answers. They're asking the state. The state's coming back with, well, kind of this, but we're not really sure about that. This is the time, I think, where if we want to make sure that these policies that are coming down from the state are set up in the best way possible for our community, I think we have some input right now. But I think that window is going to be real short. I don't think we're going to have a long period of time to provide that input. And yeah, maybe pioneering is not the right word. It was just what caught my ear and made me think of it. But I think right now it's important that we have those discussions with the state. If there is certain items that, you know, maybe work better for Medford and Grants Pass, that we say, hey, due to these reasons, we think that we're interpreting these changes to fit our community this way. Maybe they'll say, okay, and we won't have to push back.
That's what I'm saying. I like the word pioneering, you know, better than pushing back.
Yeah.
But I'm asking this rhetorically, or maybe you or staff would have some idea for council. So are there any times in a situation like this where the state might actually take into account what Grants Pass is doing? Gee, we heard a good solution in Grants Pass, maybe that will apply elsewhere. Or do they completely, essentially run things in a vacuum and don't consider us at all? But could in any way, shape, or form we inspire them to make changes that would help cities of our size?
Yeah, and I think if the governor has started this new, I'm going to say the committee wrong, but a new housing type committee. That was one of the first things she did when she came into office. We're starting this committee. So there is this huge, for the first time in a while, it feels like everyone's finally saying, okay, we're not coming up with solutions to our housing issues. We're gonna put money into it. We're gonna try to increase our inventory. But there's not been a lot of direction yet on what that looks like, because I think people are still struggling to find those answers. So I think if we, as a community, share some of our feedback and say, here's some solutions. I mean, ultimately it comes down to solutions. We have to start providing solutions. They might not be the most affordable, they might not be the best solutions globally, but some solutions are better than no solutions, in my opinion. And so if we have some ideas that would work better for Grants Pass, let's share them. Let's share them with that committee. Let's share them with the Department of Land Conservation, because I think they're listening right now, because they're just a handful of people too. I mean, really, the state planning office isn't some gigantic organization. They're just a planning office, just like we have here. And I think if we can start providing them with constructive input, it might go a long way.
Great. Any other questions? Ooh, this way. Yes, Vanessa.
Yeah, this is a question for Jason maybe, or anyone who can answer it. On the concern of the city-county overlap, does Wednesday's agenda item pose any potential to further complicate that, the Josephine County Service District for the roads? I'm not sure if you're familiar with that.
Yeah, that's an unrelated item.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, looks like we've got our questions were questioned out for you.
Thank you.
I don't know if you're
Appreciate it.
representing all of them, if there's anybody else who wants to add anything. Thank you. Okay, and like I said, I think it's important that we keep the dialogue going and check back. Yes, Darren?
Keeping in mind that I'm a recovering politician, I'm not supposed to be a
Put on your microphone. Nope, the red button.
I've forgotten how to run it. So, no, it's good to see some familiar faces. Good to see you, Aaron, Augustus, Karen, good to see you guys. This is such a great step that Justin and Gail and others are taking in trying to, and DJ, to try and get ready for this onslaught from the state. There's going to be so much money coming down that people are going to be trying to find ways to spend it now. We can argue whether it's well spent or not, but believe me or not, it is coming. And so how is the city going to be able to grease the skids? Are they going to be able to do local improvements and not put them on the developer? Are they going to be able to forgive development costs of some sort? There's a lot of ideas that I think will flesh out over this year while we're trying to improve the housing environment, because we've been in a housing emergency for years now. And it's not fixing itself. And these builders, developers, and I'm a contractor, we're not coming in here to try and find a way to make more money. We're trying to find a way to keep houses affordable. You've seen what's happened with the interest rates, with inflation, with all kinds of costs, whether it's labor, materials, all that stuff. And so we're trying to keep costs down to keep those affordable. And so it's, like I say, it's not a way to try and line people's pockets here. It's a way to try and make Grants Pass still have that great livability. Let's not overdo it, but let's do everything we can. And so I want to encourage you to keep this dialogue going, because who else are you going to have it with? These are the realtors, developers, contractors that are going to help make this thing happen. And that keeps the money local too. So I just want to encourage you to stay on it. And staff has been great at responding so far, so we want to keep that relationship going as well. But in a couple years, I hope we look back on, boy, that really made a difference. That council, that housing money, that program, that thing we didn't do, whatever it was, we're going to look back on that and be proud of it, I hope. So appreciate all you guys volunteering, but this is so important. So keep your head in the game.
Okay.
Thank you.
You bet. Okay. With that, I guess we'll close it out and know that we will continue the dialogue and expect you as home builders to go over the suggestions today and get back to us so that we know your thoughts. So thank you very much for coming. And we will move on to our next fiscal year 24 budget, LB project discussion.
Good afternoon, Council. Just want to apologize before I start here. I'm having a fit with my allergies today, and so if I become ununderstandable, you can have me repeat whatever I was trying to say. So subject and summary today, we're going to go over the previous budget reductions we did last week. And then staff was asked by council to come back with additional budget reductions. And part of that discussion was potential lands and buildings projects, or LB projects, with general fund contributions. And I know we say general fund, but I think what we're really talking about is unrestricted. And so it's kind of a synonymous term that we use here in Grants Pass, but we should probably change that from saying general fund monies to unrestricted. So the previous fiscal year 24 budget reductions we talked about, initially these are going to be temporary savings and then potentially move towards a permanent reduction if nothing is done. And so staff went through and did an evaluation of essential community services. And of those, here are the lists that we decided on last week. These are the citywide ones. We have the workers' comp reserve usage, the employee wellness program contributions, and the associated internal service charges reductions. With community development, I'm going to try and save my voice and not read all of these, but these were the lists that were agreed upon with the majority of council, with a total of $337,000 approximately. With the fire department, approximately $430,000 reduction. And just as a reminder, those corrections and adjustments can be things that we found through the budget review process. As an example, let's say if a department constantly budgeted $30,000 and we noticed that they only spent like $15,000 in any one year, we made those reductions and adjustments. With the police and support, their total is about $742,000. And by majority, the total reduction was about $2.1 million. And we need to do even more because there was still a gap to make the 30% general fund balance policy. So same as previously, staff went back and are thinking these are mostly initial temporary savings, but these could also lead to permanent reductions. And in the same criteria, trying to look at the evaluation of essential community services. So for citywide and general fund specific, we decided to put on the committee expenses that are non-discretionary. It doesn't get used that often. And in the event that no committee really has their own budget, is it wise to be having $10,000 available at council when we're talking about reducing other city services? With community development, the other reduction of potential events, and then a reduction in the program of recreation for a total of $55,000. For the fire department, a reduction in capacity for large equipment replacement needs, the potential reduction of the SWAT medic program that is in conjunction with the police SWAT program and the overtime associated with that. And then delayed fire rebranding and facility improvements, and that's what that security and signage is. With police, the same reduction in capacity for large equipment replacement needs, and a reduction of a dispatch supervisor for 8 months, temporary, and the strategic intent to rebuild that from the center for dispatch. Together, all of the departments and the citywide general fund was another $263,000. I know that number is a little bit different than the 282 we went through last week. I went down to the 1,000th percentile to make sure that we hit the actual 30% fund balance policy with this reduction. And after the additional, here is the total at almost $2.4 million in each of the departments. In front of you, I have a handout as well. Part of the discussion was potential unrestricted monies from LB projects with general fund contributions. So the handout, excuse me, the handout's going to have your project number, the project name, the current balance as of April 24th, and then that general fund piece, and then some notes. And additionally, to explain some of these columns. So the current balance as of April 24th, this can obviously change because we're not all the way through June, and some of these are committed through various projects and already have some balls rolling down the hill, so to speak. The general fund balance, or the GF balance, these are potential unrestricted general fund contributions. And then the notes, further explaining the reasoning as to the associated general fund balance in the project. So there are potential restricted reasonings included, but not limited to, and muddled, and I'll explain what I mean by muddled here in a little bit. Grants, lodging tax, SDCs, urban renewal, bikeway, water, wastewater, public administration, solid waste agency, and other current commitments. So muddled is potentially when we have multiple funding sources over time, making it difficult to discern the different part of the balance that is unrestricted. So it's kind of like going out to dinner with your friends and everybody's sharing appetizers. And what does everybody normally put in? You know, an even amount. And then at the end, if there's some left over, everybody kind of splits it equally. So we need to do some work and figure out the proportionate rate of some of those and what those come out as. So our call to action today is at council's discretion. Either proceed with the staff recommendations or provide further direction.
Sorry. All right, go ahead, Joel. I was asleep, I was trying to catch up.
Well, a good presentation, and thank you for the staff work. So everybody thinks about this over time, and we are really conservative, especially when we look at our peers in terms of the percent carryover. And then in addition to that, the 6% savings that we have, which is a good thing because it incentivizes managers to save money. I was wondering, we can still incentivize managers to save money, but reduce the 6% to 3%. And how much money would that free up then for operational expenses? In lieu of some of these cuts that could be viewed as a little more drastic than that.
So to answer your first part of your statement, so the budget is about $35 million in the general fund. 6% is about $2 million worth of savings. So 3% would be $1 million. However, the 6% is a little bit better when you're starting off next year because costs are probably going to go up.
Sure.
And so that gives you even a better cushion to meet your 30% fund balance policy.
Sure, I understand that. Cutting it from 6 to 3, though, we're still fairly conservative, and it still gives us the latitude at this point in time, not knowing where our grants are with our water treatment plant and other things coming up and the unknowns that we're facing in the future, some possibilities, and still being conservative with our 30% balance as a minimum, and then each of the department heads come back with 3%. So for me personally, that $1 million is a low-hanging fruit, and it still gives the supervisors incentive to save money over what they have, just like the 6% did. So I don't know why we wouldn't do that.
So I think mathematically, if you look at it, yes, we balance the budget every year, but what's happened is our current revenues don't keep up with our current expenditures. Right. And so we're constantly budgeting out of our beginning balance and our that carryover from year to year. So if you want to reduce that, we would probably want to make sure or make strides to being closer as far as current revenues equaling current expenditures.
And it's not sustainable. You can't keep reducing that much every year. That would just be a one-year shot.
Well, and the 6% isn't a budgeted item. It's not something we budget for every year.
Correct,
this is something that's an expectation that we've been proud to be able to say we try to control expenditures. But it's not a specific line item. It's not an LB 3272 that has this amount. This is just us managing in that. And so it would be difficult, I think, to bank on well, let's just look at it instead of a 6% return, let's look at a 3% return.
You know, if we were to do that, and there'd be some risk in it, I'm not saying that we want to do that, but if we were to do that right now, when you budget $1 million to a certain department and you tell them, well, let's return 6%, so they got to return $60,000 back at the end of the year, right? Instead of doing that, you budget $30,000 less and say, come back with $30,000 at the end of the year rather than 60%, but we're going to decrease your initial allocation to account for that. That would be the way you would do it. Not saying that that's what we want to do, but that's the way it would translate into concrete budget terms.
Any other questions? Brian?
Yeah, I just had a question about one of the items, the recreation program reduction. I was just wondering if you could explain what that is.
I'm guessing Brad could probably answer that better than I can.
That's a potential staffing reduction. We have 1.5 FTE currently. It would go to 1.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question on the SWAT medic program. I'm unsure what that is.
Yes, excuse me. The fire department currently assists the police department by providing 3 personnel to the SWAT program. 2 of those are medics, one of them is a driver. At the current time, one of the employees that's leaving us was on the SWAT program. So we're down to 1 employee right now that's a medic, and then we have 1 driver. The intent would be to take the fire department off of the SWAT program.
Okay, so my question, and thank you, I get that. So how many medics do you have right now on the fire staff? I mean, EMTs?
I don't know the exact number right now.
Okay, so does when the fire goes out, is there somebody at each station currently that is?
Yes.
Okay.
And what happens is typically whenever there's training or an activation of a SWAT, in a SWAT team, we then send our personnel directly with them, and then we backfill to accommodate whatever reduction in staff. There's also a lot of training and other types of things that they participate in as part of that SWAT team.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I had a question about the dispatch supervisor 8-month freeze. I would assume that position is either currently vacant or soon to be vacant.
Yeah, the position's currently vacant. However, with that said, we're rebuilding the dispatch center. So we are trying to hire and train at the lowest level so we have viable, quality, long-term candidates for the dispatch supervisor position. So this was a strategic decision on my part because I think we can get through probably about 8 months before we build that baseline. So then we can generate some excitement within the organization to promote from within.
Great, thank you. And then I guess this might be for JC. When we were talking about, when I asked about the recreation program, 0.5 FTE, I just wanted to make sure that in all of these reductions we're doing, do any of these reductions lay off existing staff?
Yes.
Can you outline exactly what those are?
It would be while he can confirm what I bring up out of my memory, it would be recreation 0.5, it would be cadet program of 1, it would be parking enforcement of 1, it would be one CSO potentially, but that's hopefully temporary in nature, but that could be that's vacant right now though.
Yeah, that CSO
That's
position,
vacant.
he resigned.
So the other ones are other positions are positions that we were either recruiting for, have open recruitments, or will have an open recruitment.
Okay, so .5 rec coordinator, 1 FTE cadet program, 1 FTE parking. Are any of those positions able to be rolled into other positions in the organization? As far as those people having another position to move to potentially? Like for example, the parking, could the parking person move to another position in the police department, something like that?
Yeah, I've already looked at all of that, and unfortunately, the short answer is no. However, there is potential for those individuals to test for vacancies. For example, dispatcher, call taker. One of our current CSOs is currently on the police officer list, so if she's moved up, then there'll be another opening in CSO, and that potentially those individuals can test for that open position or any other open positions throughout the city.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I just wanted to say, and I think the thing, and I think I'm more than anything talking to the press, is that all of these, notice, are temporary because we are on a temporary 23, 24, this is what we want to do, but this is not where we want to stay. And I think that's a really important thing to know, that they understand out there that as we make these very difficult decisions, that there's still a problem, because this is just for 1 year. And unless we come up with something else, there's a whole lot of years past that. So I just want to make sure that that's very clear. I also, and going back to what Joel said about the going from 6% to 3%, I personally am in favor of going from redoing our policy to go from 30% to say 28%, because I do know that we are on the high end of reserves around the state. And that is something that I am conservative as well, and I do believe it's important, but I also think that sometimes this is a time when we're getting this down and dirty and losing some very big staffing issues. Restaffing is hard. It's not like it used to be, where you posted a position and you had 10 people lining up the door. You don't have that anymore. And when you're talking police and you're talking fire and you're talking these pretty important positions, you're also talking about looking for people with a lot of integrity. And we also know out in this world right now, that's not always what you find when you have people knocking at your door. So this is really frightening for me, to get down as base as we are. And I will stand by what I said in the very beginning. I'm willing to talk about trying to stabilize and trying to not rely on only the levy, but realizing that with where we're at right now, this is a time we need to think about some serious different steps, whether that's changing our policy, whether that's looking to put a small amount on the water bill, whatever we're going to do, if we want to keep the level of service and what we've come to expect. Because right now, and for the last 10 years, we have been providing services that the city could not afford. And that's why we're here. It's not a sudden thing. It's been going on for a long time. And it's been going on since we started, I think, my first year on council in 2015, 2016, must have been 2016. We tried to put a fuel tax to take water off the water bill, because currently you pay a transportation tax. And, that was just the first step to say, we're in this position now, we need to get water rates off a water bill because we know where we're going. And that was defeated. And then once again, fire district, we asked for a fire district because we knew what was coming down the pike with all the wildfire interest things going on. This is just a scary time to get lean. So I think, like I said, this is not anything any of us are doing by choice, and I would like to consider some of those other options, but I'll leave it open to the rest of the council. Rob?
Yeah, JC, could you remind us to take the reserve from 30% currently down to 28%? What is that total?
I think from last week, we're in about roughly $500,000, I believe.
It's approximately $1 million per 3%, so every percent's about 1/3 of $1 million, roughly.
I think you said we were at 28.9 before we started to make these final cuts, or 28.4, I think is what we were when.
29.04 when we got to the $2.1 million.
Yes. Dwayne.
I have a question. If, just hypothetically, what's going to happen next year at this time if we don't get any more money? How much cuts will we have to make, or how much of a change will we have to make, percentage-wise?
Well, it's probably going to be worse because inflation costs are continuing to go up. And with property tax limitations at 3%, it's not going to keep up. So generically speaking, it's going to be this and then some more.
$1 million, $2 million, $3 million?
I mean,
I'm not going to hold you to it, but I mean, approximately.
I would guess another $1.5 million on top of where we're at, just as a generic, like, guess, if I had to make one today.
But that's keeping everything the same. We're
Yeah.
talking about a new potential.
Yes.
Our levy ends this, fiscal year 20.
Well, that was going to be my next comment is.
Okay.
If $1.5 million, so I want the public to understand that is if we don't get more revenue, it's going to be even more drastic next year at this time frame. That's what I'm looking at is if the voters don't come along with us and say, hey, we need a little more money or something, and they're not just going to be crying about the pool that we get, all those emails lately. They're going to be crying about a lot more stuff. So I think they need to understand that is if the revenue's not there, you're probably going to be waiting for law enforcement for some time. You're probably going to your house might burn down all the way before it gets there. I don't know what the thing is, or you might be waiting for a few days to get the planning department because they're closed Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I don't know what those are, but I think the public needs to understand that. Hopefully that that word gets out there that we need help. It's not free. So,
Joel.
Well, the other thing I think that's important, and the previous city manager, who I didn't know, but anyway, I've been told by other folks, you focus on a scarcity, you tend to create it. A good analogy would be, in some extent, the bank's going to run out of money, so everybody goes to the bank and takes their money out. Guess what happens? As we focus on our deficit, we can enter, and I've been a part of an organization that entered that, what I call a death spiral, where it's hard to get out of. And all of a sudden, you don't have a pool, you don't have a police force, you don't have a fire department, one that meets this level of service that's expected, and you don't pay for it. And then the economic development suffers, and then you end up, there's cities that have actually gone through that, and there were some contributing factors, but you look across the United States, there's been several cities that went into a death spiral. So one of the things I think we need to do as we move forward is not just knee-jerk reaction as to what we want to do. And I think we need to think about it carefully, because I think that's real. And I'm not sure I want to be a part of that for the future. I think a lot of citizens don't want to be a part of that.
Brian.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up. I had another question about the parking enforcement position. Do you have any idea how much in revenue that position has brought in by doing parking patrol?
Yeah, it's not as much as I originally anticipated. I'm guessing, don't hold me to this, but it's less than $50,000. It might even be around 30,000.
Over the course of a year, or?
Yeah, and that's kind of considering we did some training at the beginning of 2022 with our first parking enforcement person. So getting to know the ropes, lots and lots of warnings versus citations. So this was to be our year where we could have a full year of, full-blown enforcement and minimal amount of warnings. But it's not going to cover it doesn't appear that it would cover the full cost of a person.
Okay. Does it appear that it would cover the majority of the person?
No.
No.
half?
Yes, maybe.
Ooh, I think it's like maybe an eighth. So it's like closer probably to $12,000 currently.
I was a little bit off.
Okay,
It happens.
thank you.
I have a question, this may be for JC, and then I'll come to you, DJ. When we did our water rate analysis, when FCS came in, and we spent a lot of time doing that, we asked at the time if it's possible to get a lower rate for lower incomes, and we were told at that time it wasn't a possibility, and so we put together a program. We take money and give it to, I think it's Salvation Army or somebody, and then people can come down to them and get some help. Are there other cities, because I have heard of other cities that do have some sort of a lower, where people that are at a lower income don't pay water fees? Do you know of other, I want to say Hood River is one of them, I think. I read about a couple cities that did that.
I think there are some out there. The issue, I think, where cities want to distance themselves potentially is not play favorites, which is why they give it to an outside organization and let them make the call of what amount and who gets those amounts.
So they don't, the city doesn't necessarily track income, and so that's the reason that you go through somebody else that has the ability, who's already tracking income levels and knows who those people are. Am I correct?
We get copies of the forms and things that go along with that program. We also get informed by the Salvation Army as far as the amounts that they're requesting.
Is that fund currently healthy or not? The money.
So as costs have gone up, they seem to be using those pots of money faster.
Okay. All right. Thank you. DJ.
Can I clarify, is it okay to discuss, or are we questions?
I'm good.
It's kind of, I'm just wanting to.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
sure. Well, I guess for the sake of discussion, I'm willing to approve those current budget reductions as presented. And that being said, I'm a hard no on adjusting budgetary parameters at this point. I'm not willing to move into further credit. We have been going down this road of incrementally allocating general funds that's kind of created this issue that we have, and hope we can we can overcome. But that's a step in a direction we will not recover from, and we're not there. I'm not saying that I will never get there, but we're not there now. I'm not willing to make a drastic decision as reducing our budgetary parameters. We can make ends meet with these budget reductions and have the next discussion about revenues, hopefully. So just for clarification, I'm willing to adopt the budget reductions as presented.
Other thoughts? Anybody else want to share? Oops, this way. Yes, Vanessa, and then Rob.
I agree with you, Councillor Lovelace. I do support adjusting the reserve policy and looking into that. The only recommendation from staff today that I would like to see removed is the events. And I'm also very saddened to see that these recommendations will reduce 2.5 existing employees. I know the last time we did this exercise, I really prided the fact that the council did not eliminate any existing full-time employees, but it was more than evident in the last budget cycle just last year when this council allocated funds from our general fund for 3 new full-time employees that this would have to happen, which is why I voted no on the FY23 budget. It was only evident that we were going to have to replace those 3 new FTEs with other individuals in the very near future, so I'm sorry that it had to come to this. I'm very sorry for those people.
Okay, other thoughts? Anybody? Rob?
Yeah, on the idea of adjusting kind of the reserves and our parameters therein, you know, it seems as though, to me, when we've got cities around the state that are having reserves that could be as low as 5% or typically mid-20s, the fact that we're 30%, it seems to me that that's somewhat arbitrary. You know, and it doesn't really, it doesn't necessarily affect our day-to-day operation. It's just it's a figure that at some point, some council or some budget committee came up with that figure. It's worked for us. We've never had a problem with it. That's not to say that 28% wouldn't work just as well. And I realize it's not an ongoing, it's not a, we can't duplicate that savings every year. It's kind of a, it's not sustainable. But as far as, you know, DJ referred, you know, basically to trying to bring that back up to 30%, and that wouldn't really happen, or it'd be very difficult. There's nothing to say that we have to do that. There's no, I don't think that there's a hard reason that we have to be at an arbitrary figure. So, yeah, we need to make cuts, but $700,000 would also soften that blow some. And to me, not doing it is just kind of almost for spite, trying to teach the public the value of a dollar. Well, you know, is that really our job? I think our job is to come up with the best budget we can, have reasonable reserves, protect our future by having reasonable reserves. I don't necessarily think we need to make a particular statement by keeping it at the 30%. I'd be in favor of dropping that down approximately $700,000 and this 1 year, because we can't continue to do that. But that does soften the blow, and we could relook at many of these figures if we had another $700,000 to play with.
Brian.
Thank you. I tend to agree with DJ. I think that it's unwise to change policy on our reserves. So I'm in favor of achieving this balanced budget through reductions. However, I think that I could be in favor potentially of a 1% reduction in order to meet the goal of not laying off any current employees, and also to not get rid of our events for the citizens. And a 1% reduction would accomplish both of those things. Otherwise, I would be in favor of achieving the balanced budget through cuts only.
And Dwayne?
I would just say that I'm not happy about the cuts presented today, but I think they're necessary, and I would just incline to go with the cuts. And I'm a hard no on the dropping below 30%. I just think it's been too many years of continuing to take from the general fund and reserve, and we don't know what kind of emergency is going to happen this year. We don't know if the air conditioner is going to go out and we need $250,000 or $300,000. So I don't know. I'm more conservative of our budget does not have extra money allocated for when that emergency happens, and I'd rather have that a little bit more waiting ahead for something that comes along that we really have to have or do due to, we don't even know what the interest, we don't even know how much inflation is going to be this year, really. So I'm really concerned about the future, and I'd feel better if we had a better future budget. If we did take it down below 30%, if we knew we were going to get more money from the taxpayers because they passed a levy, I would just feel better about that, but not at this point. Just knowing the history of how many times the levy has failed going above $1.79.
Okay. Joel, Rick, any thoughts? Because right now we're at a 3-3 tie, so.
While I don't see the reductions, I think what's been presented today is reasonable, if you want to use that term. I'm not sure we have a lot of choice. I would like to see consideration in the future of changing the percentage for the reserve, but not sure that it's appropriate today. But I think we could move forward. Thank you.
So on changing it right now is no. I just want to, I'm doing tallies, so I'm just making sure I got you right. And then go ahead, Joel. State your case.
So there's a part of me that when you go to the public for a levy and you say, well, we're not going to spend 6% of it, and by the way, we got 30% we're going to keep in reserve, and we need your money. There's a part of me that's not a good message. We do need to keep the city solvent. We do need to be fiscally conservative. we are by far the most conservative city of any that I've seen discussed in both of the reserve and the 6%. And so actually, that's not 30%, it's 36%. When you look at those two things combined. And so I'm going to say to the taxpayers, oh, by the way, we got a reserve of 36% and we still need your money for this levy. I don't feel good about that. It's kind of like I'm sitting on my bank account and it's for the operations of the city.
So you might have to clarify that for a minute. So you're saying that you would go down to the 28%? Is that what you're saying? Because I know there wasn't any other discussion on the 3%, 6% from anybody else, so it was at the top end. So I'm asking you, are you willing to?
Well, if I was in charge of the world, which I'm not, it's probably a good thing. But I would change the 6% down to 3%, and then I would cut each of the budgets by 3% and say only come in with 3% at the end of the year instead of 6%. And you still have that incentive to change. Or in lieu of that, if you don't feel comfortable with that, then you would go from 30 down to 29 or 28.
Rob?
Yeah, so I just want to make sure, I know that Tom Bradbeer spent some time, obviously, coming up with an email to council. He delved into that issue of the reserves pretty thoroughly, and I just want to make sure that all councilors actually looked at that email and understood what he said. You know, I've heard words today, you know, from Brian and implied from others that going down from 30% to lower than that would be unwise. And I'm just, you know, as Joel said, we have one of the most conservative policies in the state, and, you know, using the word unwise is easy to throw around, but I just, I'm not sure exactly if any of us really understand what that means other than a figure on a page. So, you know, the public certainly doesn't, but, you know, it's quite possible that at 24% plus our 6, which is 30, is sufficient. And I think Tom pretty clearly explained his thoughts on that. If anyone had any questions on it, we could probably ask him to explain it again, but I just, it's hard for me to jump on a bandwagon that says just it's unwise, we can't do it because, but without any really concrete reason why we can't do it, to me it's, it doesn't obviously solve our crisis. We still have to cut over $1.5 million, but which we're going to have to do regardless. But we don't necessarily have to cut 2.3 million.
Rick?
I have a question to staff. I understand the 30% is a reserve. What is the name for the 6% as a line item, or how is that?
Thank you for that question. There is not a name for the 6%. That's just what we have historically underspent on an average. There's some departments that have not met that. And so that is not a budgetary tool for balancing a budget. And I'd like to see if that could be taken off the table, because that really is not, that's not a budgetary tool. That's just, we are promoting, hey, we try to be responsible with the dollars that we have. And as such, we have been underspent in these departments. Some of them aren't. Some of them are right at their level, and some of them aren't. So it's not a budgetary tool. It's not really something you can count on when you're talking about trying to make up resources.
And on that 6%, isn't that in most cases observed by vacancies?
Yes, a lot of that is personnel, because we're talking general fund operations, and general fund operations are relatively high in personnel costs.
Okay, thank you.
I just would like to add something else that we need to consider about is when we were talking earlier about our community. One of the reasons that we struggle, of course, part of it is, of course, our tax rate and those sorts of things, but it's also, we live on an island, and I can't tell you how many times I've heard Chief Hensman tell us, we can't count on Josephine County for police and services. We can't rely on places like Medford that have 3 fire districts. We don't have a fire district sitting outside. We do have rural metro, which I truly appreciate that they come and we do the assist, but they don't have medics on their fire engines. So when we cut, we are making a serious cut to our constituents. And as I said before, bringing back those people is difficult because the people, and remember when the firefighters came to us with a list of people who for the last 5 years have gone, every single one of those firefighters has gone to another place and they've stayed all that time. And why did they leave? Instability, because we don't have stable funding. So we need to make that realization and look, like you said, not what's, to try to teach our people a lesson or whatever. The reality of it is we are in an emergency situation and we need to look out for the constituents, and I would agree with Rob. This isn't about being stubborn and putting your feet in the sand and saying, I'm not going down below that 30%. Sometimes you have to do what you have to do, and then we do need to get out and discuss about where we'll go next year. But I just think under the circumstances, right now is not the time to let go of our staffing. Rob, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I definitely appreciate and agree with Aaron that the 6% is not really anything that we can budget for. However, it's a really good indicator in prior years how conservative our budgeting has been. It's also an indicator that the 30% may be more than we need to keep in reserve, because if every year we were, instead of functioning with 6% reserve, every year we were 2% below, that'd be a different scenario. I'd have a different feeling about that. But the fact that we don't typically seem to be behind tells me that the 30%, being conservative there also, is probably not necessary.
Brian.
Well, I don't know how much we need to go round and round on this. I'm happy to, drop the reserve by 1% if we're able to not, have any layoffs and cut the events. And I don't know what your tally's at, but maybe let's see where everybody's at with your tally, Val.
Well, right now we're tied. We're 4-4. So that's where we're at right now. So I guess maybe I'd look to JC. Anyway, JC, and say, okay, what if we did the 1%? Would 1% going to 29% give us all of our staff? And I don't know what the number is on events. What exactly that number?
For the second round, it was $25,000. We were looking at cutting before.
Okay, the Art Along the Rogue and the other ones. Okay,
yeah.
That's what I was clarifying. So that was 25,000. So JC, give us what you got.
So just as a point of clarification, you want to add parking enforcement, the cadet, and the recreation half FTE plus the full 50,000 of the events, or just the 25?
There should be enough to add all of the events with that 1%, I believe.
Just double checking and making sure that was the plan and not going with the original 25 that everybody signed off on last week. So yeah, I think you're at about 248. I think your wiggle room is up to about 277,000 for 1%. Yep. Yeah.
That would be a pretty close enough like for like that if that was the direction, we would have direction to put the budget document together.
Joel?
So what you're talking about is increasing the revenue we're willing to spend by drawing down the reserves and offsetting the cuts. We went through a process on the cuts, and I haven't looked at those specifically, but there were some where people agreed on them, and there were some where people didn't, and they were somewhat more controversial. And so the priority of the cuts where we all agreed on them versus what we, so right now what you suggested was three or four items, just because you have a lot of support for those events and you like those events. I would just like to step back a little bit, and I like them too, but I would just like to step back and see what we did in terms of where we all agreed and where we didn't all agree, and then have that money go to those in that terms of that priority that we have. If that makes any sense, rather than right off the top go with one council person's idea of what they want to restore.
So that I appreciate what you're saying, and we could get that up on the screen for your consideration today and put something together here, but the key is we need direction. And to come back later and say, let's reprioritize everything again, we are gonna, JC and I have definite concern about getting a budget adopted by Oregon Revised Statutes requirements.
So could we make the adjustment to go to 29% with the cuts that we made, and without the cuts today, and that would cover, and then later on make some adjustments if we so desire?
You can, well, what Councilor De La Grange mentioned was go down to 29%, utilize those funds to bring back the positions that are currently filled and the full events, community events. That would pretty much be a wash, and then we'd be able to present the budget accordingly.
Well, just my personal opinion, and I'll come back to Rick, is there are some events I would rather put the pool ahead of some events, and that's an event. That's an all-summer event, so there you go with that whole thing. So, like I said, that's kind of going back to what Joel said. It's just like, okay, well, then you're redoing those sorts of things, and that's, I don't know. Rick?
I have a question for Chief Hensman. On the parking, have you seen, now we have a full year of receipts of being fully operational. So have you seen where majority of the tickets are written during the summertime and the wintertime? There's not much activity, and for the reason, the drift of the question, could we make that a seasonal job rather than full-time job?
No, I think that's a viable job all year round, depending on how you look at parking enforcement. And I hate to put if I may just provide a share, as we talk about prioritization, we prioritize things based upon, at the specific time we bring forward a bunch of prioritized folks we could lose. As the police chief, I might look at parking very different than our dispatch supervisor. So this brings in a different question for me. I don't want to say one's better than the other, but we've talked about this at the last meeting when I prioritize roles. Much like I'd love to speak on the SWAT-matic, I have a huge concern with the SWAT-matic. That does change how I would run my organization, being the police department. But to answer your specific question, we could write parking tickets all year round.
Thank you.
And I think that's a good point, because we've been taught, if you're just taking and thinking of individuals, that's an important piece, and we greatly appreciate that respect that you have about thinking about those individuals. But by doing so, you're also taking away, you're not looking at it from what is the most important service for the community. And that's what we tried to present to you, and that's why a parking enforcement individual was chosen as a reduction before a dispatch supervisor, because as the chief was saying, a dispatch supervisor is likely a more important position than a parking enforcement. But by doing this, we are switching around priorities and not considering level of service, because we're talking about people.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Did somebody have their hand up over here? I think Rob did.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, Valerie just mentioned the pool, and, to me, again, it comes down to, often, we tell the public that, there's little that we can do to take back our parks and make things safe for our kids and so on and so forth, but through some judicious budgeting, we actually can at least keep the pool open. That's something we actually can do for kids and families, because the parks are largely gone. unfortunately. You know, and I look at, and I'm going to stereotype a little bit, but many people who use the pool can't necessarily afford their own pool or their own boat and things of that nature. So I look at that as a real benefit to the community, especially since our parks and our splash pad are essentially off limits. And I look at for people that are kind of maybe not as financially able to come up with some of their own forms of summer entertainment. So again, I would look at that as a really high priority for that reason.
Brian?
Yeah, I'd be in favor of figuring out a way to keep the pool open as well. We got a lot of citizen feedback on that, and I wholeheartedly agree with Rob. And I'm sorry I have to go.
Okay, so before we go, oh, hold on one second. So I'm just going to put out there, what I'm hearing is I'm hearing that people are willing to go to 29,000. And DJ, yes, no? Dwight, yes, no? No. And Rick?
Yes.
Okay, so if that's the case, if we gave you to say, we won't take any of the cuts today, but if there's any, I mean, all the cuts will go away, won't go, all the cuts from today, which should be covered by that 1%, am I correct? And if there's any money left over that, priority would be the pool. Is that a possibility to say that? Even if it meant, even if it meant taking.
Yeah, let me say this back to you. And
okay.
We were already at 29.04%, and this amount that we brought today would get us to 30. And so we would need to do everything on today's list and then only put back the things that you talked about today to meet 29.
I'm not clear completely. So what you're saying is, I'm just trying to look for dollar to dollar.
So before we presented today, we were at 29%.
Okay.
So if you're looking at not us looking at what we presented today, but adding the pool, is that the only thing you'd want to add is the pool? And then we would balance the budget based on the previous recommendation, just adding the pool and going to 29%.
I feel comfortable with that. I'm looking for other people to say. Vanessa's give me a head nod.
So
I still say 28% in the pool, but then that's me. So 29% and
It'll be 28.6%. We'll make it work somehow. We'll cut something else.
Okay.
Or something, but yeah.
All right, everybody okay with that? I mean,
So wait a minute.
okay with that?
You'll
Not everybody okay with it. DJ's not okay
Yeah,
with it.
you'll cut something else. Excuse me, I'm sorry. I know
Yeah.
you probably didn't mean what you literally just said, but just could you elaborate about what you just said?
What I'm looking for then is, can we be not at 29, but 28.86%? That would be great. If not, we'd be looking at, I don't know, internal training cutting or something administratively cutting across the budgets to make up that additional amount that is not directly affected by level service.
And I would just add, once again, what was brought up, is the kids don't have a park to go to. So they don't feel parks, which is by nothing that we've done. So in a sense, it is an emergency for the kids in the parks, I mean, the kids in our community. So I've heard from many of you that's important.
So if we could get, what would be, I think at this point in time, what would be the most, if in general, you have a 5-3 count that you're gonna go down to 29%, if the direction from council could be that we're going to take the initial first round reductions and we are going to not consider the reductions today. We're going to take the first round, we're going to remove the pool from that first round, and we are going to go to a financial policy of approximately 29%, which is actually 28.8 something percent. We can present a budget to you if that's acceptable.
Acceptable to me. If you're in favor of it, don't put your thumbs up, but put your hand up. If you're in favor of the 28.8 something to take none of the cuts today, but to add the pool back in, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. Whoop. 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, and I don't know, Brian left. But 4, 3, so it's 4, 3.
So, just let me clarify. So,
Okay.
it is all of the things presented today.
Yes,
If you
add it
want to
back on.
add back the cadet, parking enforcement, recreation, and the pool, that will put you at 28.86%.
So that does add those positions as well.
That adds those
Okay.
positions back, and sorry, I missed the events as well.
Okay. Yep, I take it. We'll go with it. All right. Nope, we have to go through agenda review. Nice try. Okay, I'm trying to take on, I tried. Okay, 2:41, got to get out of here by 3. So that I can come back at 6. Okay, so I'm just looking at the May 3rd meeting. It's Fentanyl Awareness and Prevention Proclamation. It's a Drinking Water Week proclamation. I guess that means we get all that good artwork has been in and judged. Is that right? Oh, cool. There's a public hearing, Development Code, Article 11, text amendment to repeal the tree deposit requirement, which is a checkoff of one of our things today. And consent agenda, we have a resolution from water treatment plant bulk chemicals, resolution for water treatment solids hauling, and a motion acknowledging the March investment report. And at that time, 3 members will be appointed to the HBSC. On May 8th, we will be having a special executive session to meet on litigation with CIS, our lawyer. May 15th workshop, there is an interview with Urban Area Planning Commission candidates. Feral cats will be addressed. They like to be called community cats, I'm just telling you. The sale of property follow-up workshop, transportation impact analysis next rezone area, and an addition of the proclamation process, and an agenda review. Then May 16th is when we begin budget committee meeting. The first one's May 16th at 6. May 17th is our meeting with a UCAN proclamation, an ordinance text amendment, solar standards, CD legislation, resolution adopting sustainable and energy action plan, so please look that over, it's ready for discussion. Resolution adopting the parklet program, motion approving welcome center design, resolution adopting the housing production strategy, and a resolution for the DAS final amount, which I believe is about $5,000. Is that correct? Yes. And then on the consent agenda, motion development code, Article 11, text amendment to repeal the tree deposit findings of fact, emergency call taker, new classification, resolution approving Teamsters contract, and appoint the UAPC member. So after that, we'll have budget meetings, continue, capital tour, budget committee meeting, and then it just kind of fades out. So is there anything on there? Yes, Dwayne?
What's the UCAN proclamation?
It's a proclamation that UCAN is bringing to us. I don't know.
UCAN director asked that we put a proclamation that would thank the volunteers for the warming center this year in order to make that happen for the service for the community.
There you go, Joel.
Okay.
Yes.
And I'm also excited to see the solar standards. So both the solar standards and the tree things are coming up relatively within the next month. So that's great. Okay. Anything else? With that, I will take a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Joel. Is there a second to that? Thank you, Dwayne. With that, we are officially out of here, 2:44.